good to see all of you here. Thank you so much for coming. We've got an overflow crowd. I hope that the staff is directing people where they can or at least watch this on video and be seen. So let me call the April 23rd meeting of the Charlotte City Council to order. And first, we'll start with our introductions. I'll start with Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. James Mitchell, City Council at Large.
Greg Phipps, District 4.
Tarek Bakari, District 6.
Matt Newton, District 5.
Good evening, Emily Kunze, Deputy City Clerk.
Bob Hageman, City Attorney.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Larkin Eggleston, District 1.
Good evening, Justin Harlow, District 2.
This is one of the safest meetings I've ever attended. Ed Driggs, District 7.
Happy Monday, Braxton Winston at Large.
Good evening, Julie Eisel, Mayor Pro Tem and Council Member at Large.
Good evening. I'm Vi Lyles, serving as your mayor. When we begin our meetings, it's with an invocation or expressions of inspiration, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. The invocation is made by a council member, and it's intended to solemnize our proceedings. We celebrate religious diversity in our community, including those without religious faith. You're welcome to stand or sit for this moment if you wish. I do ask everyone to stand for the pledge. Tonight's invocation will be given by Council Member Phipps.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to stand, and if anybody wants to join me, they can. Heavenly Father, we come before you tonight as elected leaders and a community of citizens to thank you for the many blessings that you have bestowed upon us. We ask for your continued covering over our city and the many leaders at the federal, state, and local levels who have collectively provided influence over our governance. Grant us the wisdom and patience, dear God, to govern in a manner that is honorable in your sight. As we deliberate on the business of the city we ask your special blessings for our men and women in uniform all over this nation and the world who make it possible for us to serve in a free and open democracy. Heavenly Father, we also ask for your anointing and protection over the service and sacrifice by our law enforcement officers, firefighters, and EMTs who respond to citizens' call for service each and every day to keep our neighborhoods and communities safe. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will hold our public hearing. It's a public forum before our business meeting begins, and we have 10 speakers signed up for this time. Each speaker has 3 minutes, and I will try to call you down. If a speaker who is in that top 10 is not present, then I have a waiting list, actually a very extensive waiting list this time with more than 9 people on it. Then we'll come back and start at the beginning of our waiting list. So I'm going to call 2 people at a time so that you can come down and we can be prepared to hear you speak. Thank you. Let's see Ms. Shirley Hines and Lindsey Brown. You would come down. Hines, thank you. Please begin.
Hi, my name is Lindsey Brown. I am not a law enforcement.
Lindsey Brown. I'm sorry, I had Shirley Hines. I did not mean to do that.
That's okay.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
I'm not a law enforcement officer. I have never been one. My immediate family, we don't have any. But today, I am here to speak to you on their behalf. I want you to listen to what the officers are saying, their actionable plans to attract and retain officers to our city. I felt so strongly about this that I made the trip down here, and as a disabled person, it does take considerable time and significant planning for me to do so. And this is why. Last year, I met Officer Dr. Sean Ward at a transparency workshop. I came because I was skeptical about police and what they were doing in our city. It was the first CMPD officer that I had taken the opportunity to connect with, and it had a huge impact on my life. He inspired me to learn more and to do more. So here is what I have done. I got to meet Major Campagna. Him and Sean, they helped me set up 2 more transparency workshops in my area, North Charlotte. I got to meet community coordinating officers for North and University City Division, Officer Bisulto, Officer Peets, Officer Meadows. I then learned about more community meetings where I got to listen to Captain Butler speak. I got to meet Captain Rutledge. I did a ride-along with Officer Cuvette. I am currently enrolled in the Citizens Academy, and I can list half a dozen more officers that I've met and taken the time to speak with. But to keep it short, they were all positive interactions. Everyone I met was absolutely dedicated to keeping Charlotte safe. And what I am terrified of is that other cities are going to take them. We have to be proactive to keep Charlotte safe as it grows. A lot of more knowledgeable people than I do have numbers and plans, and I am just begging you to listen to them, because as a citizen, I want to stay safe. On the Charlotte City website, it says, Charlotte's government works hard to ensure that the community will be a winning city for everyone. No one wins if we're not safe. We need to be competitive.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. Mr. Cantrell. And how are those babies doing?
They're currently at home with my wife, ma'am. She would love to be here to support us, but we do have pressing matters at home. Good evening, Mayor Lyles, City Council, and City Manager Jones. My name is Wade Cantrell. I've been a member of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department for 23 years. I grew up in Charlotte. My family lives here. My parents, as well as my brother, lives here as well. I tell you this because Charlotte is my home, and I'm concerned about its future. I believe that it is time to invest in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, specifically the salaries for police officers. After graduating college, I applied to 2 law enforcement agencies. I was accepted to both, but I chose CMPD. I believe in CMPD's ability to positively affect the lives of others, and I'm glad that I stayed. Other officers have similar stories in that they've been accepted to other agencies, but they stay and come to Charlotte. That trend is changing as a result of the lack of payment for Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officers. Officers are coming and they're leaving. The vast majority of police officers do not live in the city limits of Charlotte. They simply cannot afford to. They work here and then go home to other communities where they continue to give. They are athletic coaches, mentors, and volunteers. Charlotte loses out on the time that they give their communities instead of the residents of Charlotte. The Charlotte expects CMPD officers to be the fabric of our community, but yet you do not pay them enough to afford them the opportunity to raise their families here. Every day, CMPD officers invest in the community of Charlotte. We fill up a tank of gas for a stranded motorist on East Independence Boulevard. We pay the fine to remove a boot from a senior citizen who cannot make it to a doctor's appointment because she misread the parking restrictions. We pay for a week at a motel for a homeless family during the winter so that they can stay warm. We are investing in the individuals in our city. We ask you to invest in us. Before I had a family, I didn't worry about my salary much. I could work extra jobs to make up for gaps in the cost of living. Officers depend on this extra income to support their families. My wife and I have 2 children and both work full-time. Time is limited and does not afford me the ability to work the extra jobs. I miss the extra pay. The extra pay made a difference to me. A pay increase would alleviate some of this burden for me and my family. The most important asset any organization has is its people. CMPD has great people, and the city should support us and fight to keep us here. I know these are difficult financial decisions to make, but I also know the city spends millions of dollars every year in community investment products. We are a community investment. Invest in us so that we can continue to make a positive difference in the lives of the citizens of Charlotte.
Thank you. Now, come on down. Michelle Hummel, thank you for being here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here. My name is Michelle Hummel, and some of you know me and probably are wondering why in the world is she standing here in front of you to talk about issues of pay and benefits when I'm nearing retirement. Let me explain why I'm here tonight. Look around this chamber for me, please. It's kind of hard to miss them. What you see surrounding you are sheepdogs. If you haven't heard that term, the sheepdogs, are the protectors. They are what stands and faces the wolves, the danger, the evil that many don't want to believe or remember exists. So why am I here? Because I am their protector. Even the sheepdogs need someone to look after them sometimes, and your time is now. You have the ability and the power to show the sheepdogs that you appreciate their hard work, their dedication, and their sacrifice. We all know why we are here, pay and benefits issues, but it didn't get this way overnight. I'm here to tell you that this has been a long time coming. There have been many tweaks and tinkers with officers' pay steps, and merit dates that have gotten us to this point. The time has come for a wholesale independent inspection and assessment of the department's payroll with regard to years of service, lateral status, merit step for the entire department. This should be done by a group unaffiliated with the department or the city. It must be independent. Your employees' trust depends on it. This is no one person's fault. We're not here to point fingers or establish blame. We are way past that. There have been years of trying to get it straightened out, only to find that the next year there's another issue caused by the tweak that was made the year before. Look into it, straighten it out, fix it. Your sheepdogs deserve it. Now for something that does affect me and all the folks you see standing around. Insurance. A hard look should be taken at grouping these people that you see standing before you, both police and fire, into one group for insurance purposes. These folks are a unique group of people when it comes to their jobs, and their benefits should reflect that. All city employees are not the same, and the benefits don't have to be either. What good is insurance that causes you to need a second job to pay the cost to cover your family, or work in retirement to make ends meet because your insurance costs are so high? No one comes away from a police or fire career unscathed mentally. The job takes a toll on you mentally and physically, much of which is not realized until after retirement. Look into it, straighten it out, fix it. Your sheepdogs deserve it.
Thank you. Eric Stout.
Hello, my name is Eric Stout. I've been with CMPD since September of 2006. I'm here today to talk to you about the current state of officers. I'll sum it up for you in 3 simple words. We are tired. We are tired from working all night long and then spending all day in court only to have our cases dismissed for no apparent reason. We are tired from being assigned training on our days off. We are tired from the city landing a major event so it cancels more of our days off and our vacations. We are tired from continually defending ourselves against false accusations and outright lies. But worst of all, we are tired from not being able to count on our employer. When I took this job, I signed a contract with the city that said I would be topped out in 9.5 years. That time passed 2 years ago, and I'm only now on step 8 of 13 because the city changed the pay scale. The department recently decided to hire lateral officers with less experience at step 8, the same step I am on. Then it decided to bump over 100 officers from step 7 to step 8. Many of these officers will reach their merit date and get to step 9 before I will. This means that multiple officers with less time on will soon be making more money than I do. Some of them have as much as 3 years less time on. At this current pace, it will take me 17 years to top out. 17 long years of serving my community before I reach top pay. I, personally, am tired of the city changing the playing field. Councilman Winston, at December's meeting, you stated, "I know Mayberry is set in North Carolina, but Charlotte is no Mayberry." I agree with you 100% on this. This is not Mayberry. It is Charlotte, one of the fastest growing cities in the country. Every day, new residents flood into our area. The city is growing at an astronomical rate, yet our department stays the same size. Major events are continually coming to Charlotte, bringing revenue with them. The money is there. We are tired. We are tired, and it is up to you to fix it. Like many other officers, I've been forced into a corner. Do I stick it out with CMPD? Do I take a job in the private sector? Or do I leave for the Raleigh Police Department? It is not a decision I want to make because I'm afraid of what that answer might be. You know what we want, and you know how to get us there. I implore you to take action before it is too late. We are losing officers left and right because we are tired. If you fail to support your officers and your city, then you are going to see a lot of badges turned in at property control as we leave for better options. I'm afraid my badge will be one of them,
Thank
and I'm
you.
afraid of...
I appreciate it. Are you Mr. Grant?
I am.
It's nice
Yeah,
to see you,
that's Mr.
Peter.
Grant.
I guess there's something, something.
This is my district.
Oh,
Peter
so you're in,
Hawley.
Well, how
okay,
are you?
thank you.
Good. Mayor Lyles, member of council, Manager Jones, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight regarding the current and upcoming budget proposal for the public safety sector of the city of Charlotte. The city of Charlotte has been using an equation to determine employee pay that is over 25 years old. Public safety employees' pay is based on being within the 50 percentile of the national average. Even using that simple equation, the city of Charlotte has fallen short in how it pays the public safety sector of the city. Entry-level salaries are nearly 7% below the average of comparable cities. The pay disparity did not happen overnight. According to the data provided by city, officers have been receiving an average of 1.6% raise per year for the last 11 years. This 11-year snapshot includes raises for some officers from up to 3.7% to 2 years with no raises. As you already have heard, this does not cover increases in insurance premiums or officers who are still in the STEP process. It's a holistic stat for the entire department. If we were an average city, the 50 percentile equation would make sense, but we're not average. We're the 17th largest city in the United States, 17th largest metropolitan area out of 50 largest MSAs, second largest city behind the Southeast, behind Jacksonville, Florida, largest population in North Carolina, third largest banking city in the country, sixth busiest airport, fourth fastest growing job market, 20th overall growth, fourth in attracting families, 10th fastest growth in the nation, #1 city for net millennial mid-migration, voted most up-and-coming city in the nation, home to both NFL, NBA teams, and MLB and NHL farm teams. Not one of these statistics represents an average city, rather above average in every sense of the word. Still, public safety is based on being within the 50 percentile of the national average. We currently have one officer for every 450 citizens. That changes drastically every day. Over 230,000 people commute into Charlotte daily from surrounding counties. This increases our daily population to over 1 million, which means 1 officer for every 656 citizens or 15 officers for every 10,000 citizens. Based on these numbers and the fact that there are 60 new people coming into the city on a daily basis, we would need to hire a new officer every 11 days to keep up with growth. Unfortunately, we are currently in a deficit of 174 officers, and every 11 days that deficit increases. We've also seen a 20% decrease in applicants since 2016. As I mentioned, we are 7% below the national average for entry-level salaries, but unfortunately, we are 20% below the national average of top-out pay. It shows our inability to maintain a competitive pay scale. It's why we lose so many officers after 5 to 7 years. They take the value of the training and experience gained here to another job offering more competitive pay. It's no secret CMPD produces some of the best trained officers in the nation, but we're losing them on investment. A conservative figure based on pay alone estimates the cost of $300,000 to $380,000 to train officers to the 5 to 7 year mark. It doesn't include the cost of benefits. This is an investment we can't afford to keep on losing on a yearly basis. The retention of officers is not just an issue within CMPD, it's a nationwide epidemic. Officers are leaving the profession for more lucrative jobs and seek out police departments willing to pay premium salaries and accompany good benefit packages. It's become the norm. The level of decision-making, accountability, schedule demands, and job-related stress accompanied with modest pay is not a combination most job seekers are looking for. We've done a phenomenal job of promoting the city, and it shows. Our growth our city has experienced over the last 10 years is remarkable. Our economy remains stronger than most during the 2008 recession. Our current...
Mr. Grant, thank you very much.
Raise after that.
Danny Graham? Okay. Is Danny Graham here?
He's not speaking tonight, ma'am.
Okay. Henry Roselle?
That's me.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I will try not to repeat what has already been said and proposed these last couple of months, as by now you have all those details. Tonight I would like to take a different approach and talk to you about the life of an officer so you know what you are investing in. I am here speaking on behalf of the 99% of those officers who are loyal, selfless, and would not hesitate to enter a school during an active shooter event. I have been an officer for the last 18 years. 7 years ago, I was promoted to sergeant, and 7 years ago, my job responsibilities changed. I no longer come to work to answer all the 911 calls or investigate a case that was assigned to me. I come to work every day to take care of these officers, such as the ones here today, the best I can. If I take care of them, they take care of the citizens of Charlotte. The citizens of Charlotte then get the best possible service out there, but I can't do it alone. I need your help so that we can take care of these officers together. I can't provide them with a pay raise or retirement benefits, but you can. Every day an officer leaves their families just like all of you do and heads off to work. We put on our pants the same way. We drive in the same Charlotte traffic, and we shop at the same stores. I say this to remind all of you that we are human and we are not much different than one another. However, there is one huge difference that is priceless. An officer starts their workday preparing themselves on how not to get hurt or killed, trying to figure out how he or she can return home to their family in one piece. For starters, yes, we do put our pants on the same way, but in addition, we wear something that other jobs do not require, a bulletproof vest. Why doesn't every job require one? I think you know the answer. People don't call 911 to invite us over for dinner. Whenever we answer a 911 call, it's because someone in Charlotte is in need of help. It could be a disabled vehicle, a robbery, or a helpless young child that was sexually assaulted. We are coming to help resolve their problems no matter what. Every call is different, every call requiring a different solution. An officer goes through emotional ups and downs consistently throughout their shifts. 1 minute they're working on an accident report, the next minute they're chasing an armed suspect. Finally, after doing this all shift long without getting hurt, killed, complained on, sued, or fired, they head back to see their family and have to be a father, mother, husband, wife, friend, or coach. Then wake up the next day and do it all over again for 30 years. In addition, these officers have their days off canceled to work for base pay so that they can provide security for events that bring millions of dollars to our city. As the saying goes, no one signs up for this job to get rich. If our pay was based on the extraordinary and brave work these officers do each day, we would all have Tom Brady's salary, but we don't. You have a great opportunity here right in front of you to show these officers that you truly appreciate the work they do every day. So when you make your decision next month, please ask yourself what it would take for you to put on a bulletproof vest, not football pads, and do this job.
Kathy Curlin. Is Kathy Curlin here? Kim Holmes? Kim, is Kathy also here? Okay, come on down, thank you.
Either place, okay. Greetings, City Council. I'm here as a resident of the Ballantyne area in the city of Charlotte, representing countless voices who could not be here this evening. We have an ongoing great concern regarding our tremendous loss of trees and green space due to our rapid growth and development. Mature tree save and green space save and growth and development can harmoniously coexist. It requires attention, education, organization, ordinance changes, and funds to achieve this. Funds to educate and disseminate the information for all involved. That being our citizens, developers, corporations, tree services, and lawmakers regarding the critical importance of tree save and green space save. Excuse me. There are numerous statistics and studies elucidating the many profound positive effects of trees and green space in all environments, and particularly in the urban and suburban settings. With our daily addition of new residents at the rate of 40 to 80 per day and their accompanying vehicles, we are increasing our CO2 emissions significantly. Trees reduce the CO2 emissions by 25%. In addition, they provide floodwater mitigation, and given the increase of impervious surfaces, that becomes more critical every day. Trees also reduce the ambient temperatures on hot days and mitigate winds on stormy days. And of course, trees add a sense of belonging and peacefulness that is difficult to quantitate. Although there are studies proving the improvement of quality and equality of life in urban developments proportional to the number of trees. Charlotte's crown jewels are her trees. We implore our city government, whom have been so forward-thinking in so many environmental regards, to continue that forward-thinking, continue to be creative and proactive, and do allot funds to protect and preserve and care for our trees. We could use existing vacated big box stores and strip shopping centers to be converted and remodeled to wonderful affordable housing, thus cost and land efficiency. Regarding tremendous increase in traffic due to development, trees have been shown to calm aggressive driving and reduce crime. Design elements can be incorporated to mitigate speeding and increase driving aesthetics, such as along Selwyn Avenue with big trees and islands and roundabouts that slow traffic and improve pedestrian safety. More parks and greenways for bike and pedestrian travel connectivity is ideal, and more education for our citizens in the value of trees to their property and health and how to care for their trees. For those without funds to care for trees, perhaps a program of Share the Shade like Duke Power has for Share the Warmth, so funds can be donated to help others care for their trees. Education and media coverage all require funds. We want to see more green for our green scene and more ordinances and incentives to save our trees and green spaces, a reflection of our citizens' heart's desires. Charlotteans are indeed passionate about saving their trees. They're just not sure how to assure the implementation of mature tree and green space save in the face of aggressive and rapid development. Please let's focus attention and funds on preserving Charlotte's crown jewels, her trees and green space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Holmes. Oh, Dr. Holmes, excuse me. Next, we have Patricia Hannum. Is Patricia Hannon here? Okay. Jalen Lowry, are you here? Yes.
So hello, I'm Jalen Lowry. I'm a junior at Hawthorne Academy. I'm also the student body vice president, and I'm also a vice president of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Youth Council. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Youth Council is the unified student advisory for the city of Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, and CMS. It is an innovative partnership between youth, local government, schools, and Generation Nation. We represent every high school, we advise community leaders, and are active in helping solve issues we care about, such as opportunity, education, and safety. The Youth Council reported to you here on September 25th, November 27th, and on February 26th. We're back to update you on our most recent work. Thank you to Mayor Lyles, Councilmember Ajmira, Winston, Isel, Eagleston, Harlow, Mayfield, Phipps, Newton, and Driggs, who took the time out to meet and speak with us to help us learn more about and share our views on housing, neighborhoods, safety, transportation, economic development, and other topics. This winter, we met with and advised the school board and county commission about ways to improve our school's safety, equity, and opportunity, and help CMS to find ways to improve the budget. With the county, we launched the Imagine Mecklenburg Student Art Contest. We advised a new CMPD recruit class on best ways to engage with youth. We'll meet with the next class in July. We met with the media to better understand how they could cover the news, get interview tips, and to share our feedback on local news. After the Parkland shooting, we held several meetings to talk about what we can do to help. We talked with CMS and CMPD about the need for improved active shooter training for students. We did many media interviews and even had state and national news interests. Patricia Benega and I were on Flashpoint, and the NLC legislator invited us to work with them on this issue. Speaking of Raleigh, we represented Charlotte at the North Carolina Youth Legislative Assembly, where my co-voice President Righteous Keat was recognized as the state's outstanding committee member. Nationally, Morgan Heron and I represented Charlotte at the NLC DC conference last month. We served on the planning committee. Morgan led a panel on international relations, and I led one on youth voice and local government. We also heard from cabinet members and senators and spent time with our own local officials. I attended my first meeting as a nationally appointed youth board member for the National League Youth Education and Families Council, and I look forward to representing the Charlotte Mecklenburg Youth Council in the city of Charlotte at NOC this summer. As Charlotte's young leaders, we are proud of what we have accomplished and how we have built and grown the Charlotte Mecklenburg Youth Council to what it is today. Issues like safety, education, and opportunity impact everyone. We must work together to create solutions. As always, please reach out if we can be of service to you. We are your youth council.
Thank you, Jalen. We really appreciate that. Brad Starnes. Brad Starnes. Gregory Sharp.
Good evening, Mayor Lyles, Mayor Pro Tem Iselt, City Manager Jones, and council members. My name is Greg Sharp, and I'm with the Charlotte Fire Department and Charlotte Firefighters Association Local 660. We are here today to stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in law enforcement as their first responders who protect this great city from harm. We're also here in support of the council's vision of a world-class city and the city manager's vision of the city being the employer of choice. To go along with this, we need to also be the provider of choice and the investment of choice. Hitting this triple bottom line, we'll have a highly skilled and educated workforce that is representative of our city in their demographics. I'm a 24-year city employee, have worked for both CMPD and CFD. I have put my life on the line several times in defense of this city's residents and their visitors. I never expected to become wealthy risking my life, but I did expect I would be able to live a basic life and retire when I was no longer physically able to adequately protect those I swore to serve. Currently, that ability to step aside and allow those more physically capable is threatened. Our city HR has made the statement that they are trying to price out retirees from the health insurance plans. I cannot retire without the option to have affordable health insurance to protect myself and my wife. I swore to protect all of you and have done so for over 24 years and will do so for several more. All I ask is you protect me and my wife for the few years between retirement and Medicare age of 65. We support our brothers and sisters with CMPD in their quest for compensation that is in line with the current market and the reinstatement of retiree health insurance. We have identified several compelling reasons the city should look at reinstating retiree health insurance. Other cities offer some form of retiree health insurance and are enticing employees away from Charlotte. Thus, to be the employer of choice, we need to reinstate retiree health insurance in some form. To recruit and retain a diverse workforce, we need this benefit. Employees who do not have health insurance may not retire until they reach Medicare age, which may mean the cost of savings that was projected by dropping retiree health insurance will not be realized. Those over age 55 in police and fire are injured at a greater rate than their younger counterparts, thus increasing workers' compensation costs. This same group takes twice as long to return to work from injury, therefore increasing overtime costs to cover their shifts. Again, this same group will be at a higher risk of cardiac events and contracting cancer as they will continue to be exposed to increased risk of these events, which increases the health insurance payouts. This same group, once again, will be at top pay of their respective ranks and remain there longer, preventing those coming in at the lower ranks and at a lower payroll, increasing payroll costs. We continue to research all these effects to get strong and accurate numbers for your consideration. On the surface, it is clear the city's decision to eliminate retiree health insurance most likely will not result in any savings, but may very well result in an increase in cost to the city as well as a reduction in the effectiveness of employees. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jonathan Griswold. Mr. Griswold, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and City Manager. My name is Jonathan Griswold. I stand here as well as other members of the Charlotte Fire Department and Local 660 with our brothers in blue that help protect this great city. I have only been a member of the Charlotte Fire Department for just over 3 years and still have many more that I look forward to. The other thing I look forward to is retirement. However, because I was hired after 2009, neither I nor my wife will have affordable health insurance when I retire. It seems just like yesterday I swore to protect this city. The saying is, I am not here for me, I am here for we, and we are here for them being all of you and the other citizens of Charlotte. I too am asking that you protect and be there for me and my wife between retirement and the age of 65 when Medicare is initiated. We support CMPD in their request for compensation that would bring them up to the current market rate of pay, as well as the reinstatement of retiree health insurance. There are several different reasons why the city should look at reinstating retiree health insurance. Without affordable health insurance, employees may not retire until they reach Medicare age. Police and firefighters over the age of 55 are prone to be injured at a higher rate than their younger brothers and sisters like myself, which could increase workers' compensation. If injured, they take twice as long to recover and heal from their injury, which could potentially increase overtime to cover their shifts. Another point, they're at a higher risk of cardiac issues as well as cancer, and they will be in these environments, which will increase health insurance payouts. At this age, they would also be able to top out at their pay in their ranks, preventing new hires and newly promoted members from entering the first pay step, which would lead to higher payroll costs. To recruit and retain a diverse workforce, we need to reinstate retiree health care insurance and in some form and match what other cities are offering that they are using to lead employees away from Charlotte. This decision to eliminate retiree health insurance will most likely not save any money, yet may increase the cost to the city of Charlotte. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. That is the last speaker that we have for this evening. You're welcome to stay for our next zoning and public hearings, as well as 2 policy items that we have on the agenda. Council, we're going to do consent agenda, followed by the 2 items that we have for business, which are the Charlotte walkability recommendations and the housing recommendations. Then we'll start all of our public hearings and just keep rolling from that point on. So while they're moving, I'm sure that I'm going to ask for a motion for the consent agenda. Let me make sure I have the number of items. Consent agendas item 23 through 64, except for the following. Number 26 is going to be a policy item. That is our housing issue. 43, 56, 57, 60 are settled. And a correction on item 64, the property owner's name should be James Crabb, not Jason. And we have 33 for a comment. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Have a second. All right, Ms. Mayfield, before we vote, you have a comment on 33?
I did, Mayor.
Curious.
Excuse me. And forgive me for taking a extra
okay.
minute. I broke my glasses, and reading glasses are an important part of my life today.
You want?
So,
I
the
get- I don't
Sugar
think
Creek
these will work.
54-inch sanitary sewer rehabilitation. So for that one, we had this particular project is another multi-million-dollar project, and we did not have MWSBE participation. They had a 7% goal. But I do want to thank staff because I asked for a little more detail and background. And we actually had 41 MWSBs that were identified and contacted. And I think that it will be helpful that we continue to, when we are unable to reach the MWSBE goals, to be able to show, at least give us an idea of who is outreach, because then that helps with staff when we continue to have the conversation of where we have gaps in creating more job opportunities for small businesses to be a part of this conversation. So I did want to acknowledge if anyone was reading and saw, if they saw online that they could not achieve a 7% goal, there was a reason why, but they did actually contact 41 different MWSBs.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mitchell?
As a follow-up with that, because I was looking at the same thing, we do have staff here from the Charlotte Water.
Did you want to see spots?
Ms. Lee? We had pulled it for comment only, so
Oh,
do you want to pull it? And we'll just go ahead. Ms. Lee, please.
yeah, I think Councilman Mayfield brought up a good point. One was 41 firms we identified. I guess for me, it's the good faith effort. So how many points do they earn for the good faith effort?
One second, one moment.
10.
Ms. Rosado, thank you. We've got the wrong person up here.
I'm sorry.
We
So,
got
Ms.
the-
Lee-
It's for the bid, not for the construction.
Okay.
So we-
Actual contract.
So Councilman Mayfield say 41?
60,
60?
yes.
So just information, could we see that sheet, not now, but later on? Because I think we had a brown bag conversation, some of us, about good faith effort. So I think it'd be very helpful for this council to find more ways we can strengthen that. Because I think around this dais, we try to make sure our MWSBE participate in our city projects. So if Nancy, if you can send that to us, particularly on this one. So the question, Ms. Mayfair, we have 41 companies that we
Were contacted.
were
Yes, sir.
contacted? And the reason why we did not select anyone out of 41?
Get that from,
I think that's the, Ms. Rosado?
yes, and let me get Mr. Carl Wilson here. He
Okay.
can give more details regarding the bid.
Mr. Wilson, thank you for coming up.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Carl Wilson. I'm with Charlotte Water, so hopefully I can answer your questions. What was your question, sir?
So out of the 41 companies that were contacted, what's the reason we did not select one of those companies?
Well, the majority of them did not respond back to us, to the contractor that put out the questionnaires and the contact information. The others, there was one that responded that I know of right offhand that that responded. However, what they responded for, the contractor got it done cheaper using the existing contract that they had on a person they had on the contract.
Okay.
And it was in a different scope of work.
Mayor and Council, thank you.
Okay. All in favor of the motion for the consent items, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. The next item that we're going to go to is on our policy agenda, item number 17, which is item number 19, which is Charlotte Walks. I'm trying to find my speakers list again.
Make sure Nancy submit that information.
Miss. If you'll just give us a moment. We're trying to determine about a public hearing, whether or not we've already held a public hearing on Charlotte Walks. So I wanted to mention that we had speakers sign up for this item, but we've already held a public hearing. And by our rules, that means that it's now time for the council to deliberate from what they've heard from committee, from the public. And so Ms. Cavazza, Mr. Zavera, Mr. Rupp, and Mr. Jacobson, if you will observe, we will be discussing Charlotte Walks and item 19 for the revisions. These are sidewalk construction ordinance revisions. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending the sidewalk construction requirements in Chapter 19 of the City Code and adopt an amendment to the sidewalk retrofit policy to reimburse eligible affordable housing projects that reconstruct substandard sidewalks on thoroughfares?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further council discussion?
I do.
Mr. Phipps, did you?
Yeah, I do.
Mr. Phipps and then Mr. Driggs.
Yeah, I was wondering, Mayor, in view of that we did have a public hearing back last year in November, and the subsequent changes that have come about in that ensuing period, will there be an opportunity for maybe staff to give a brief overview of the specific changes or not?
You would like to hear a staff presentation of the specific changes? All right. Mr. Curry, thank you for being here. And we'll have a summary of what the plan or what the revisions are going from and to.
Sure. Thank you all. My name is Scott Curry. I work for the Charlotte Department of Transportation. Happy to be with you all again this evening. I don't have PowerPoint slides to answer your question, Councilmember Phipps, but I think it's a fairly simple answer. The last time this came forward for council consideration, concern was raised about the potential impact on affordable housing projects. Council directed staff at that time to work with the affordable housing development community to overcome any concerns that they had about these proposed amendments. We've done that in the time since that meeting in November, and I understand that they have sent you all a letter of support indicating that fact. So that is the update. That's the only thing that we were asked to look into and change between the meeting in November and now.
We just received a Charlotte Walk sidewalk amendments, fast facts. I believe this is from the staff, and the questions are addressed there. So with that, any further questions of Mr. Curry? All right, Mr. Driggs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I expressed earlier a kind of certain level of dissatisfaction with the way this has been brought forward. I don't believe it just closes a couple of loopholes, as has been represented. I think it actually has pretty significant implications for certain types of development. I've heard objections from the developer community that they don't feel that there was adequate consultation and that this is kind of minimizing. So whereas I do support our sidewalk policy and I recognize the need for sidewalks, I'm not sure this was handled in the best way it could have been. It was not taken back to the Development Services Technical Advisory Committee after changes were made that had been requested. And for that reason, I'm not going to support it. I hope we can have a process that leaves all of the affected parties feeling comfortable that they had the opportunity to participate and to express their opinions about things like this. Because in fact, this is quite a substantial requirement. And in some situations, putting 14 feet along the edge of a property could have a significant impact. So again, just a general comment on process, do support Charlotte Walks and will not be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the council? I have Mr. Winston and then Mr. Phipps.
Just follow up on what Mr. Driggs said. It's my understanding that all frontage on thoroughfares already has that 14-foot or 16-foot setback.
Mr. Curry,
So
you're
you
being
wouldn't be
asked.
actually adding 14 feet?
It depends on what's there currently.
So let me repeat the question to make sure I understand it. You're asking if the building setback on thoroughfares is at least 14 feet?
Yes, so we wouldn't actually be asking to add any area.
That's correct, yes. As part of our conversations with the development community, they raised a similar question about does the 8-foot planting strip and 6-foot setback fit within building setbacks on thoroughfares, and the answer is yes, it does.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes, I wanted to get a better understanding of the level of outreach that we've had with different stakeholders on this process. You mentioned several times that we had several meetings with the development community. Could you just briefly describe those outreach efforts and what was the relative feedback from the group in terms of the veracity of these changes, or whether or not that they were in general agreement with them, or did you note any kind of dissension from what we were going to put forward tonight in terms of trying to advance this forward?
Yes, sir. So we've met with the development community 6 times now over about the past 20 months. We met 4 times with that Development Services Technical Advisory Committee that Councilmember Driggs mentioned. We met once with our UDO Advisory Committee, and then once specifically with the Affordable Housing Development Community and the folks who sent a letter expressing concerns to you all. So those are the 6 meetings, and in the FAQ sheet that was just circulated, there's some details about those meetings and also the public hearing that we also had back in November.
So just to read, I mean, did you get any, I guess, pushback from the community of such that would cast doubt on whether or not these adjustments are universally accepted? Did you get any feedback relative to that in terms of from the development community that these changes were still not satisfactory?
That's a really high bar to be universal.
Well, I settle for just the general tenure.
General tone.
Sure.
Acceptance or not.
I'd say most of the comments that we received in those 6 meetings related to the specific thresholds that would trigger the new sidewalk requirements. Our development community partners were very concerned about how and when those thresholds would apply, and so we made some significant modifications based on their input to try to figure out what are some common sense triggers for when and how these would apply. So you'll notice they apply on thoroughfares only. That's a result of the public outreach that we did through the Charlotte Walks plan, where the citizens we interacted with said that back of curb sidewalks and sidewalk gaps are really a big concern on our higher speed, higher volume streets like thoroughfares. We also tailored it to the scale of development, so this is not applicable to a change of use. It's not applicable for someone completing an interior renovation. It's only triggered by significant site work and redevelopment, and so that's also something the development community asked us to be mindful of.
Any further? Mr. Bakari?
Yeah, and we talked about this at length in the TAP meeting earlier today, but I'll just echo what Councilman Driggs said as well of, I feel like there was a lot of meetings, as you've said, 6, and we keep hearing that over and over again, but at the end of the day, we don't have a unified group, a coalition, all coming and saying, this is what we all have agreed to and negotiated to. And I am a big fan of what the loophole that this ultimately closes, but between the unintended consequences and costs, concerns from other legitimate parties, and then what I talked about today with, we're going to see this administrative variance used, in my opinion, heavily when we move forward. And we have just, kicked the can slightly down the road and not solved the major problem of contradictory ordinances at this point. So there's tree save, and then there's sidewalks, and, why can't we put out hard and fast, this wins out, and then the exception can be asked for by the variance. So I'm going to be a no as well right now. Just not that I don't support sidewalks. I'm a huge fan of it. I just think there was some big rush to get to the end of this, and I'm not sure why we didn't take a couple more steps.
I don't have any further. Do I have any further? Mr. Phipps?
Yeah. As I can recall, the first public hearing, well, the only public hearing we had, I think you said something to the effect that we had 9 speakers, and only one, I guess, spoke, had some concerns about the affordable housing piece. Is that correct?
As I recall, it was 8 speakers in support and the 1 speaker who mentioned the affordable housing concern. Yeah.
Right. So I thought even at that time back in November, we were almost on the cusp, I think, of approving this, save for that one vote where we went back to the community to get more input on the impact on affordable housing. So I don't know, I would have a hard time saying that this was a rush job in as much as we worked a long time on it, had a public hearing, and now it's 5 months later, we're coming back. So I guess it would be up to us on the dais to see which way we want to go forward. Thank you.
That sounds like a good plan, Mr. Phipps. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So noted. Thank you very much, Mr. Curry, and thank you to the council members. I'm often reminded of the courageous vote that Pat McCrory made when he was on the council to get us to get sidewalks on both sides of the street and under construction. And I just find that when we are working on these kinds of quality of life issues for the long haul, it's truly important if we're going to be a walkable city, and this is in our walkable plan. So thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is 26. It is the FY 2018 Roman numeral 2, I think, housing funding support request. And we're going to have a brief overview of what this request is and what it means. First, approving a waiver of the locational policy for 5 multifamily housing developments, approving the Housing and Neighborhood Development Committee recommendations of housing trust fund allocations for a total of $14.3 million, and then finally approving the Housing and Neighborhood Development Committee's recommendation of trust fund allocations for 4% multifamily developments for a total of $9.5 million. So, do you want to open, Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, let me start by thanking all who were in attendance last Friday. We actually hosted our very first housing retreat, and by all accounts, I do believe that we had a very productive meeting from 1 to 6 p.m. Tonight, we do have another opportunity to take action that will assist us in this commitment to expand the supply of affordable and workforce, and you know, I love diverse price point housing when we think about how the city is growing. But as we outlined this in October of 2016 in our community letter, by approving our Housing and Neighborhood Development Committee's housing funding support recommendations. As a reminder, the Housing and Neighborhood Services staff presented this information to the Housing and Neighborhood Development Committee during our March 27th committee meeting. The committee unanimously voted to approve the housing funding support for each of these developments outlined in our request for council action and grant a waiver, the necessary housing locational waivers. Housing and Neighborhood Services staff also presented this information to us during our April 2nd, 2018 strategy session. I want to pause and thank all the members of the Housing and Neighborhood Development Committee for not only my co-chair, Mr. Ed Driggs, as well as my colleagues, Dr. Harlow, Mr. Eggleston, as well as Mr. Newton, and for being there and leading the conversation this past Friday. As a reminder, approval of the Housing Trust Fund dollars in support of these tax credit requests provides local alignment with state-supported developments through the awards from the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency and allows for leverage of our local Housing Trust Fund dollars. And as previously stated, several of these proposed developments require your approval for the waiver of our housing locational policy, which we are working to update as a committee. The state will announce these awards in August of 2018. Due to the competitiveness and the limited amount of available tax credits and the NCHFA's desire to disperse awards throughout the state of North Carolina, the NCHFA will not award tax credits to all of the recommended 9% developments. Therefore, any approved HTF funding for developments that do not receive tax credit award will be returned to the HTF for future allocations. Finally, I definitely want to again thank all of my colleagues on the Housing and Neighborhood Development Committee, but also to all that attended on Friday and took time out of your day. The work that we're doing around this important conversation and this topic is detrimental to our community. And with that, I want to turn it over to our Director of Housing and Neighborhood Services, because Ms. Whiteman, I think we have a couple of conversations happening in the community, and there's some information that may not be as accurate as some people think. So I am turning it over to Ms. Whiteman to give us a full presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. Ms. Whiteman, and we do have 4 speakers signed up to speak, so it's after the presentation by the staff, we'll have our speakers come forward.
Sure. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council, and Manager Jones. As been stated, my name is Pamela Whiteman. I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of the city's Housing and Neighborhood Services Department. It's my pleasure to provide you with a brief update tonight on your housing funding support request. We talk a lot about how does Charlotte become a winning city and our desire to become a winning city. One of those traits is the ability to create affordable spaces. I'll also hearken back to the council's community letter post the Keith Lamont Scott shootings, where you all accelerated an existing goal to create 5,000 affordable housing units within 3 years rather than 5. I'm proud to report that we are 72% of the way there, and if approved tonight, you have the opportunity to add up to 550 units to that count. Tonight, we're going to be looking at affordable housing, and I always like to remind us who needs affordable housing. We have various industries represented here today, but let me remind us that it's entry-level health aides, it's folks in the retail industry, the restaurant industry, and many of our own employees, as has been heard tonight. I also like to remind us that when we talk about affordable or diverse price point housing, we're actually talking about rents ranging from about $395 to $900 per month. So that's the type of housing that you all and we are trying to create as a city. I'll remind us that we've talked a lot about what are some of the strategies for creating more affordable housing. What you're looking at tonight is some of the strategies that we've been talking about, 2 specifically. It's the ability to unlock the potential of the 4% non-competitive tax credits that the state awards, and it's also the ability to support the competitive 9% tax credits that the state awards. Since the inception of the Housing Trust Fund, you all have financed approximately 6,797 affordable housing units. I would add that over half of those serve households who earn 30% and below the area median income. So I'll take a step back and talk about the evaluation criteria. We issue a request for proposal every year. Staff reviews the submitted proposals once received. They are processed according to our guidelines. These guidelines include the location to retail amenities, close to in proximity to transit. We brief the Housing and Neighborhood Development Committee, we brief the committee, and then we're here tonight for your approval. Some of that evaluation criteria includes the number of the years that the units will remain affordable. We want to serve this problem for the long term, so we place 30-year deed restrictions on any units that are approved with city funding. We also look at the strength of the development, specifically the number of units that will serve households earning 60% and below the area median income. That's about $42,000 per year for a household of 4. We look at the track record of the developers. We want to ensure that we are partnering with developers who have a proven track record and who can get these units to the market as quickly as possible. We also look at how we leverage your city dollars. We achieve about a 1-to-6 leverage ratio. What that means is for every public dollar that we put in, we get $6 from somewhere else. And then we also, each of these developments are subject to a market study, an independent market study. And the purpose of the market study is to ensure that there is a need for these units. And each of these market studies show that there is a high absorption rate, meaning that there is a waiting list for people needing these types of developments. So I'll talk about, as I stated tonight, you all have the opportunity to consider both 9% and 4% tax credit developments. Let me just spend a moment right there and just reiterate that not all of the 9% competitive tax credit proposals that you see here will be awarded tonight. That is because the state awards tax credits across the state of North Carolina. These are very competitive. If we get our fair share in Charlotte, we will only get 3 of these deals in Charlotte, and the state undergoes strict scrutiny. They actually come down, they drive the sites so that they are ensuring that they're not clustering these developments in one particular area. The 4% are non-competitive, and they will be awarded if you all approve. We will send up, the developers will send up their final applications in May, and awards will be announced in August of this year. Any developments not receiving funding, the money will be returned to the Housing Trust Fund for future allocations. I also want to remind us of how we're funding these. We started with the Housing Trust Fund balance of about $1.4 million. We've received some program income. We also are using a federal tool that is eligible for this type of use. It's called the Home Fund. We are using $3.2 million of that fund. And the way that we have $3.2 million of unallocated home dollars, that is left over from previous years when we did not do as many House Charlotte down payment assistance loans as we had done due to market dynamics. And then we are also looking to reallocate $1.8 million from a previous project. That gets us to a total of $6.8 million to work with for the 9% developments. So you can see that we have no way of knowing which 3 developments we will get in terms of the 9%, but we've added up, if we got the most expensive 9% deals here, that would equate to about $5.8 million. So we have enough money to cover those, and the 4% will be awarded pending additional dollars that may be identified through the city managers and the council's budget process, or when we get a new bond in November. The last thing I would add is to call our attention to the number of units in this stack that are eligible to serve households earning 30% and below. That's about 26%, or 173. And in the 4%, 20 units there are eligible that will be used. The developer has agreed in cooperation with the state's KEY program that provides a rental subsidy for households earning 30% and below, that they will allow 20 of those units to be occupied for residents earning 30% of the area median income as long as the KEY program is eligible. And you all talked a lot about that at your retreat on Friday. So I will pause right there, and this ends my presentation. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for your continued work around expanding the supply of affordable housing throughout this city.
Thank you, Ms. Whiteman. And so we have 4 speakers on this item. Sam Todd and Angie Ford. Are you here? Please come down. We have 3 minutes for you to speak, and each, and then following Ms. Ford, we'll have Arthur Griffin and then Adam Siprock.
Good evening, Honorables Mayor, City Council, and staff. My name is Sam Todd. I am a native of Charlotte. I'm now in my 8th decade as a member of this community. I am proud to call myself a Charlottean, and I want to thank you for the sacrifice you are making as public servants. I'm here tonight primarily as a member of some local civic groups, Carolina's Jews for Justice, A Way Home, and One MEG, all dedicated to improving housing options in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. From personal experience, I know that government can make a big difference in people's lives. When my dad died when I was 12, it was a monthly government stipend of $100 that allowed my underemployed mom, my sister, and myself to remain in the home that my dad had built with his own hands. Having a stable place to call home is absolutely fundamental to strong families, communities, and cities. All citizens deserve a chance to have a home. Because many of us have attended your meetings and workshops, we know that you have made diverse price point housing a core deliverable. Also, you agreed that the policies of the past have not been successful in meeting the housing needs for many of our citizens. Madam Mayor, you are absolutely on point when you say the #1 way to build confidence and trust in government is to deliver on the needs that are most important to our people. An excellent starting point in this task is for all of us to ask the difficult and uncomfortable questions. Some sacrifice from all of our sectors of our communities is required if we are to build a just and fair housing policies. We must be bold. I heard at the Housing and Neighborhood Development Retreat a consensus to look at new ideas and stay determined to do a better job in the next year or two than we have done recently. The groups that I am representing strongly urge you to consider the following solutions as a better means to meet our housing needs. #1, tonight we urge you not to commit the $9.5 million to the 4% tax credits because the return on investment is weak. Only 20 units will be dedicated to those less than 50% of the area median income. #2, expand housing subsidies to people into 30 to 50% AMI through programs like master leasing and A Way Home. In the weeks ahead, increase the Housing Trust Fund to at least $50 million so that affordable housing can be reserved and built. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ford, how are you today?
Very well, thank you. Hope you are. I'm Angie Ford. I'm an advocate for affordable housing with the Homeless Services Network and One MEC. And I too want to thank you for the time and effort you are putting into this work. We are gratified that the 9% tax credit proposals now require at least 25% of the units to be affordable for those below 30% of area median income. However, the proposed allocation of the $9.5 million to support the projects for the 4% tax credit include no provision for those who make under 30% AMI, a vague promise of possibility, which is what we've had in the past. Often when we remind city personnel of the criticality of the need for housing those at extremely low income levels, we are told that the math does not work. So I decided to put my math degree to use. And I observed that this is because of an incomplete set of variables and faulty assumptions. For example, the assumption that the calculation must yield additional financial profit for those who have historically profited from the plight of the poor. I think this is an item for negotiation. This math should also factor in the cost of all those enrichment programs that are destined to fail because students who are insecurely housed are too traumatized to benefit from them. The Evergreen Report and the report from the Opportunity Task Force tell us that we need new and creative approaches to solving the housing inequities in our city. As the editorial board of The Observer recently pointed out, continuing to plow housing trust fund money into higher income housing will not make the biggest need go away. I ask you to revisit these two projects with their business as usual approach and either supplement them with additional funding or invest that $9.5 million in new, more cost-effective ways like rental subsidies or preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing so as to benefit more people in the lowest income bracket. I'm also a church lady, and in my prayers, I thank God for your willingness to serve this city, and I ask God to release in you the courage to do what others before you have not done, and in so doing, to catapult this city up from 50th out of 50. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Griffin, welcome. It's nice to have you over there instead of over here.
I'd rather be at home with grandchildren.
Wow.
Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Anyway, good evening, Mayor Lyles, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. My name's Arthur Griffin, and I wear many hats. Tonight, I wear the hat of chair of the Black Political Caucus of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. I'm here tonight to support your comprehensive strategy to provide diverse price point housing, Councilman Winston, opportunities for our citizens, and to ask that you not delay adopting such policy. Affordable, decent, safe housing fulfills a basic human need for shelter. It's like clean air and clean water. Children in stable housing do better in school and are less likely to experience disruptions from absenteeism due to unwanted moves. I will not repeat the volumes of research to you in support of diverse price point housing. By now, I know you understand the data better than I do. What I want to do is urge you to act now. In 1963, Jim Pope, an African-American community leader, was quoted in the Charlotte News advocating for affordable housing before this very same body. Didn't look like this body, though. In the 1970s, a lawsuit titled Harris v. HUD. In the late 1980s, I was here when Johnny Harris appeared before you asking for zoning considerations for a little bit of dirt out there, about 1,764 acres down south. We now call it Ballantyne. On his commitment page, and let me quote you, because I still have his documents. The housing element will include a variety of housing types for rent or sale, which are priced to accommodate various income levels represented by Ballantyne's workforce. Waiters, waitresses, secretaries, teachers, teacher assistants we had back then, healthcare workers, managers, and owners. In 1993, former Mayor Richard Vinroot wrote me a personal note in support of affordable housing. In 93 and 94, I appeared before this august body to suggest several policy options supporting affordable housing. As an enlightened community, we can't simply afford to continue to kick this can. I like that metaphor, kick the can down the road. Since the 1960s, since Ballantyne's request for zoning changes, the cost of land, the cost for rents, and the cost of just living has skyrocketed. We have the most enlightened city council in a half century with respect to this issue. And I look to you to approve a comprehensive, diverse price point housing policy and strategy. Finally,
You got a great statement right there. That's a great place to stop. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Second.
Mr. Adam Suprak, and then we will have Joseph Margolis immediately following.
Council, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Adam Suprock, and I'm a member of the local Democratic Socialists of America. As Democratic Socialists, we believe in government truly for and for the people. We are fighting alongside the groups here today to transform our country so everyone, particularly Black, Indigenous, immigrant, LGBTQ, Muslim, and other oppressed communities can thrive, not merely survive on the scraps of a wildly unequal capitalist system. We believe that housing is a human right. I would like to start with asking, who rents the apartments and homes? They are the people that prepare our food at restaurants and nurse us health at the hospital. They care for our children and our elderly. Tenants are doing the work that make our community run and are rewarded with low wages and high rents. We know that having safe, affordable housing is necessary to survive, and we will fight for that right until it has access to everyone. From school safety to the health of the person, housing is a solid foundation for all people. With precocity of living with high rent, any incidents can domino in displacement and homelessness. Not only are individuals at risk of losing their place, but communities as a whole are blown to the winds of the market as they are forced to relocate. Solid communities provide support that help keep the bottom falling out the residents. Putting pressure on the housing market by supporting public housing is an uphill battle, but is a battle that must be fought. I've recently been attending a series on the history of West Charlotte. Of course, the land we stand on has been stolen by the native Catawba and other tribes of Turtle Island. The series started from World War I campsite Camp Green. It started the story of Farmer's Tenant's Tent, a Camp Maid, and then the history of redlining and zoning began. Time and time again, the history of those with power displaced those without power. The rich and vibrant history of those communities fighting is foot where they have. Learning about the history allows us to validate it. This Thursday will conclude the final is the 3-week event. I passed out flyers to the council. I invite you to the talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Joseph Margolis, thank you. Please come down.
Good evening, Council. My name is Joseph Margolis, and I hail from Derita, home of what many of you may know of a restaurant there called Maria's Diner. I'm here to speak about this part of the agenda item. I was pleased to hear Ms. Weidman say that clustering, the state will make sure that clustering does not happen. That was going to be the crux of what I talked about. So I'll just leave it at this point going forward. That would be the only thing that I would ever be concerned about in Derita, because what I saw on the proposal, within about 3/4 of a mile, there's 3 of these affordable housing developments, and I'm supportive of everything that the previous speakers said before me, but I've also read empirical evidence against the prospects of clustering these types of communities, leading to long-term negative results. And as a matter of fact, all of you heard from Darlene Heater earlier tonight speaking about this, and where I live, where Derita is very close to University City, even though it's not part of what University City Partners currently covers. So she says something very similar to that. So I'll just keep my my remarks brief, and I just hope after this is done that you as a council will get involved with the UDO. I've spoken with Dr. Harlow and Councilman Phipps. Some of the at-large people here would get involved in doing something to help Derita get its fair share of what's coming with the Unified Development Ordinance that's coming down the pipe once we get past meeting this critical need to our city, because I believe that a lot of the concerns that I have, and maybe some of the people that I've heard from in Derita as well, would be met in just helping Derita to become just a community center. There's a small town, downtown feel about it along Sugar Creek. If you go up Gibbon Road to where it intersects with Nevin, you get a little bit of that too. So there's potential for it to be a place that could be a space where people who live there can go and want to be, besides just Maria's Diner. So I hope that you will consider that, and I thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Whiteman, I have a couple of questions for you, but as you're making your way up, one of the things that the reason we had the housing retreat is because we had not ever had a real conversation for a committee or council, specifically around what our goals are for housing. And we all, if you've done any research or any studies around housing, then you know this is not a conversation that just started yesterday. We can go back to, the reality, especially for minorities in the community, to the GI Bill and who had access for housing and who didn't, and redlining and so many other things. But even the PWA, the Public Works Administration, for the short period of time that they were around and the segregation that was created. And you've heard from me multiple times, I am not a fan of concentrated poverty. Having 100 units that are all 30% and below, that is what created projects. But I do want you to explain a little more the specifics around, one, the fact that the state has instituted the 25% mandatory at 30% and below, and also if you can speak to the conversation that the statements that were made specifically around why would we allocate $9 million for less than 20 units, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure, Ms. Mayfield, thank you for the opportunity to come back. And let me just preface this by saying I know this issue of diverse price point housing is very complex, and there's no one size fit all. I thank everybody for coming down tonight, and thank you for your work at your retreat on Friday. And so I'll hearken back to your retreat on Friday. We talked about clustering, and I don't like that word. It's a negative term, but I said it. People think about clustering. They think about, as you alluded to, when housing authorities used to build public housing, where that was all housing for folks earning 30% and below. We don't do this. We would never recommend it that way. The financing doesn't work for that. So we're trying to balance the approach of providing diverse price point, a range of incomes for folks, working families in most cases. You all heard that a little bit from our police and fire tonight. The ability to have affordable housing. We talked about naturally occurring housing, and so kind of what you see, particularly in the two projects that are 4%, they are in job centers near the Mount Holly, Huntersville Road area where new jobs are coming, and so we want to put affordable housing on the ground now so that people can have an opportunity to live in that center. And then the Sugar Creek Road one, I'll remind us of what happened on the Blue Line, and we don't want to repeat that on the Blue Line extension, so this is a way to get some housing for working families in that area today. If you look at the 9%, and if you do the averaging, that's about $34,000 per unit for all of the units. And so those would be my comments around, I know it's complicated. We can't, certainly no one is saying that we have to forget about our brothers and our sisters who need housing at 30% and below. Thus, the state's mandate to include 25% of the units for 30% and below, and also in the 4%. As I said earlier, the one development, they have agreed to, as long as the state's rental subsidy holds up at the KEY program, it's called the KEY program, they will have those units for folks earning 30% and below. So I know it's a long answer, but it is complicated, and so I just want to make sure that we all have an understanding of what's being proposed here tonight.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So we have 3 actions before us. Do we have a motion? We need a motion?
Well, I was going to make the motion, but I thought we had a couple of more questions for Ms. White.
I thought we were beginning discussion.
So you want your motion?
Yes, let's have a motion, and then we'll start the discussion.
So I am making a motion for action A, which is to approve the waiver for the housing locational policy for the 5 multifamily housing developments, as well. Move for approval of A, B, and C, A and B. B being approving our Housing and Neighborhood Development Committee's recommendations of the trust fund allocation for the total of $14.365.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. All right. Is there discussion? Okay. Dr. Harlow? Yes, Dr.
Okay.
Harlow?
I didn't know if you wanted to get all the names
I'm
first. but yeah.
sorry.
Good deal. Thank you, Ms. Weidman, and thank you, HAND Committee Chair, Ms. Mayfield. We had an arduous 5 and some hours and some change on Friday, really digging into this this complex issue of diverse price point housing, the economics of it, what makes sense, how do you break percentages down, 30% AMI, 60% AMI. I appreciate many community members for coming out and witnessing that and also sharing with us your thoughts. It's also good to see the Yes in My Backyard signs and diverse price point for all signs, housings in here. It's very different than some of the not in my backyards that we hear about a lot. So I want to speak very directly, and Joseph, thank you for being here. We've gotten a lot of emails, particularly in the Statesville and Derrida area, around, clustering, and so I'm really glad that you made that point, Ms. Weidman, around how we have 11 projects that we're presented with tonight that we're looking to support with the Housing Trust Fund. However, with the 9% tax credit, only 3 of them will be awarded. And so, and the state is very intentional about not clustering that. And so hope that calms some of this concept of, hey, we're not funding to cluster pockets of poverty. And I'm tempted tonight to say any of these create poverty at all with these 9% proposals, but I do believe that we have to give these projects all a chance in leveraging what we can do from a city standpoint, and then allow the state to make their decisions in August. I am a little concerned about the 4%. We're in this business of trying to unlock the 4%, and particularly the Sugar Creek one that commits 0. During the rezoning, we can't really talk much about the breakdown of housing. We're not supposed to, and so today I see that as a fine fit. Could you speak a little bit more about this key program, though? Not for myself, but then also I think for the community, because when we see the presentation of the 2 4%, which are non-competitive, those generally will happen, just for community members to understand that. How does this key program help add in more of the lower end of the income spectrum into these units, especially in a project like the Sugar Creek one that says it's 180 units, totally 60%, when we contrast that with the other Brookshire Boulevard one that actually commits about 25%.
Yeah, so I want to be really clear, Mr. Harlow, and thank you for the question. The development that I'm talking about who has committed, it is not the one on Sugar Creek, it is the one on Brookshire Boulevard who's committed the 20 units for the KEY program. But what the KEY program is simply is, it's a rental subsidy that folks who earn with disabilities and who earn 30% and below have from the state to allow them to live in diverse price point housing. So that rental subsidy will help them pay their rent. The other thing I would add too, not necessarily about the KEY program, but we talk a lot in this community about rental subsidies, and rental subsidies are certainly a component of the strategy. But I'll remind us that at the end of the day, the one who's holding the rental subsidy still needs a housing unit that they can afford to live in. Also, we talk a lot in this community about housing choice vouchers that are going unused. These types of units will provide a unit or a property owner who will accept a housing choice voucher. So we're creating the units at the same time.
Thank you. So that actually clarifies a lot for me. It was actually my assumption that the 4% had that, both had, that KEY program, I guess, addendum to it. So this is, well, I'm in extreme support of all the 9% programs, but I do have a little concern, and I'll use your comments around how do we make sure we don't make the same mistake along the Blue Line extension. Not mistakes, but we create some opportunities around Blue Line extension that maybe weren't created along the original Blue Line. And so when we think about our most vulnerable, 30%, 50% and below AMI, and we have our biggest ask in the 4%, $5.3 million, I'm a little concerned about the leverage on that particular 4% project. And so I'm not sure what the protocol sits as it relates to how we vote. Do we break the individual projects up? I would request that we pull that one out for separate vote. That's the 924 West Sugar Creek 4% project. That's just my comment on that. But
we can. Why don't we go through the discussion and just see if you want to pull that out? We certainly can do that. And then I have Mr. Driggs and then Mr. Winston.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to comment first on the 4% program. I recognize it's not as exciting as the 9% program, and it doesn't provide that 25% guarantee. And I want to preface my comments by saying I supported this in committee, and I will support it tonight. Of course, we want to go for the 9% deals. Those deals fund 70% of the cost of a project. They include the requirement that we have the 25%, 30%, and they have 60s and others in there as well. However, that doesn't mean that the 4% deals are worthless, because the need exists across quite a wide spectrum. And if it doesn't exist today, and this gets back to the NOAA point, it will exist. If you look at the curve at the way rents are going up versus the way incomes are going up, we need to deed restrict properties in order to prevent tomorrow's affordable housing from becoming inaccessible, and also protect it from being redeveloped. So to that extent, I think the 4% investment is worthwhile. It represents basically a gift from the federal government that pays for a third of the cost of those projects. Granted, at a different price point, but not worthless, worth doing. I would also note that to try to create more 30%, you need to understand the ratio of the number of units at 30% that we can create from a certain amount of money with the number of units that we can create at these other levels of affordability and deed restrict. So I believe we need to have a balanced policy that covers the full spectrum. We need to do what we can about the 30%, but we don't want to go broke just funding those and then maybe exacerbate the benefits cliff too, where people who get up to higher income levels don't qualify for that kind of housing and are hit even more by the fact that they happen to have income in the 60% AMI range. The thing I am a little concerned about in the proposal is we did have the meeting on Friday. I think it was a very constructive session. And I think to sum up, we came away with 3 principal policy initiatives that the committee was going to recommend to full council and hasn't actually had a chance to discuss with full council yet. But that had to do with NOAA housing, and I see signs up there. It had to do with creation of new housing, and then there were other funds, private sector funds, and other initiatives intended to kind of improve the accessibility of housing and help people to basically earn enough in order to pay market prices. So we're trying to close that gap, as Councilmember Bakari has pointed out a number of times. Let's not just work on bringing this down, let's work that up. The situation we're in right now, though, and this is what concerns me a little bit, is we haven't yet heard from the manager what his recommendation is on the bonds and our capacity to kind of decide on exactly what we want to do this year. And we have had some indications of our debt capacity, but I don't think council has really had a robust conversation yet about what kind of commitments we want to make. And the truth is, at this point, we're kind of emptying the piggy bank and we're reaching for the credit card. So we're taking $1.7 million out of the trust fund, which empties it completely, cleans it out. We're using money that was committed to a project that hasn't completed yet. That money is going to have to be replaced from some future funds. And we're talking about 2 4% deals for which absolutely no funding has been identified. That funding also is going to have to come from future funds. So I really think that this proposal begs the question of what our plans are going forward, because whatever we do going forward, we will have already spent $10 million or more just by making these commitments. So in that context, I would like to reiterate my proposal that we save some money in the CIP that was slated for amateur sports, and that we recognize that the amateur sports facility that was proposed in the CIP did not come to fruition. There is no amateur sports facility, there's no public-private partnership, and I think we should be able to redeploy those funds and allow the link to be paid for, at least in part, from hospitality funds. This is a way we could create some funds currently to meet this gap that we're contemplating creating tonight, and then we can start the future funding plans for affordable housing with a clean slate and not working against a deficit of $10 or more million before we even start. I'm not going to make a motion tonight because I would like to hear the conversation about what our plans are and the recommendations from the manager. So I'm just mentioning it again, that I hope this will be part of our conversation going forward, and that I feel that we can try to fulfill our promise on affordable housing and not just dig a hole for ourselves going forward. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Winston?
I wanted to start by honestly thanking my colleagues. I think, Charlotte, you should know that you do have a city council and mayor and staff that is really committed, and we talk about and we put pencil to paper and we put real feet on the ground in trying to figure this issue of diverse price point housing and affordable living seriously. And I really do feel like every day we are learning something more about this. We know that this is not just a Charlotte issue, it's not a North Carolina issue, but it's a nationwide issue. Thank you, Ms. Mayfield, for convening that retreat. It was very enlightening. For instance, one of the biggest things I took out of it was how effective these 4% deals can be, especially when they're unleashed in the proper fashion, and they haven't always been unleashed. I think some of that has been due to political will, especially around transit-oriented development. So I'm excited about the potential of using that tool in a better way moving forward. Ms. Ford, tonight you just mentioned in your comments about a master lease. That's something that I've never heard of, but something that perhaps we should be looking at and learning more about to employ. There are many, many tools out here. What I would say, what is clear as well is government can't handle and do this all by ourselves or alone. Look, I got pretty frustrated at the beginning of this term of figuring out how to really push a button, that it took 8 weeks. I don't necessarily think citizens want us to be their landlords when their toilet breaks. With that said, as we see, there are 11 projects here. We know there is a demand for affordable housing or diverse price point housing. Not all of these projects are going to make it. The way the rules are set up and the way we spend our money, it just doesn't allow for that. But there's a market, so that market should be supplied. The demand should be supplied. We see the same people kind of at these conversations. We see government, we see activists and citizens. We do see a bit of private, private businesses that want to bring solutions in the affordable housing developers. But I tell you what's missing in this, other private sectors that we're going to depend on and to partner with to come up with solutions to fund these projects. Because when it comes down to it, we'll fund 5 projects out of these 11, but there is potentially viable solutions here if we can create funding opportunities for the remainder of the projects. Where is private business in these conversations? Why are they not why do we not have business leaders from around our city in this room right here, right now? So I would invite those business leaders, especially, again, something that Ms. Ford said, that we're dealing with projects that have very slim margins, so we have to get creative in financing these projects. So that means not only do we need private business, but we need high-income earners to really help us come up with financing solutions that provide low returns on investment over long periods of time to really create market solutions. I would really love to see private business in this chamber, in these rooms, when we are having these conversations and trying to figure this out as we put pencil to paper, and too often they are not there. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you for allowing me this time.
All right, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor. So Pamela, just 2 comments. One, it'll be helpful because what's going to happen after tonight, citizens will approach us and say, where are the projects located? And so I will ask, if you don't mind, put which district these projects will reside in. I think it'll be helpful for all of us, all 11 projects. And secondly, on our waiver policy we approved in 2011, I hope we can have a discussion about that, because that waiver policy is outdated. And it's not fair to you, the staff, to keep coming back for us and asking for a location waiver. Then the citizens always think and say, well, we thought about that, we planned, I thought you were gonna protect us. So I do think we need to have that conversation quicker than later about changing our location policy. So thank you, I will be supporting this. Affordable housing is very important to our community, and the presentation you all had at dinner about a month ago was very enlightening for all of us. So thank you for your leadership and hand committee. I know it's tough, but appreciate what you all are doing.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I have Mr. Newton.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question for our city attorney, but first, I'm going to pontificate a little bit here. I think what we've heard, this is a very, very complex issue. I'm also a very strong proponent of our locational policy and making sure that it's updated as well as maintained. But I can't help but ignore, and I do think that we're all but on the same page as it pertains to the 9% projects, knowing full well that only 3 will be selected by our state. So some of the concerns pertaining to clustering maybe don't apply there, but I think from the standpoint, and I wanted to just elaborate on Councilmember Harlow's point. I think from the standpoint of the 4%, particularly the Sugar Creek project, I harbor some concerns. We know full well that the vast majority of the affordable housing problem that we face in our city pertains to our 30% AMI and below population, nearly by a figure of 4 to 1. And I feel like if we don't address that, then we are kicking the can down the road. At the same time, if we're building up, if we're talking about going 30% and above, building up in case there's more of a gap that will open up down the road, then what we're really doing is we're leaving the most vulnerable citizens of this city behind. And so I harbor a lot of concerns pertaining to those particular points, and I wanted to ask the city attorney if Councilmember Harlow were to move forward on this idea of pulling the Sugar Creek project. How would that look? How would that be accomplished? Is there a procedure to do that? And if so, what is it? Let me clarify. You're speaking in terms of action tonight. Yes, and I think it's on point B, because it seems like we're all on the same page with A and I imagine C as well.
So the motion that's before you is to approve A, B, and C. Your rules do allow dividing up a multi-pronged or pieced action. So certainly with a request of council member with the mayor's approval, you could divide the question. Pull anything out you want for a separate vote.
Thank you.
Okay,
So are
are
you
you?
doing that?
Yes.
All right.
Is that the end of your question or comment?
Yes,
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
I'll make it quick. Just a couple things. I wonder if next time we get these packages of different projects, even though we know they're not going to all be approved, could we get a map?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, and I think that's even going into, hopefully we'll be mapping what our city is going to look like and where we have aspirations to put affordable housing in relation to transit. The other point that I want to make is here we are in one night where we have all of our police officers here, and Officer Grant gave us a chart of minimum pay and top pay for Charlotte police officers, and the minimum pay of a Charlotte police officer is 60% AMI. So this is exactly what, the bulk of these units would be for police officers coming right out of the academy that need a place to live, that we would love to have live in the communities that they serve. So they tap out, with a high school degree, they tap out under 100% AMI.
And
So
Ms.
this is
Eisel,
accomplishing other goals.
thank you so much for stating that. And if I could just add one more thing. I talked about this, the one program, one rental subsidy program, but I would also just strongly remind you all that the 60% units, all of the units in the 4%, they will accept housing choice vouchers and other rental subsidies like the Away Home that you all provide. So that you still need the units along with the rental subsidies at the particular AMI. So consider that as you're deliberating.
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Bakari?
Thank you. Are we good?
Did you?
It's my turn?
Yes, and then I have Mr. Bakari, Mr. Phipps, and Mr. Eggleston.
Great.
And I think that would have been a full round of everyone to speak except Ms. Mayfield, who has spoke at the beginning and is coming back. So, all right, Mr. Bakari.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, I hope that anyone around this dais and those of you who are plugged into this would know that I have, while I didn't come into this role on council thinking this would be something I would be, waking up in the middle of the night thinking about, I've gotten to that point with it. And I have gone full bore into learning as much as I can and dissecting it and breaking it down. And I've made this one of my issues now. I'm not a champion for years and years like many around us and many in this room, but I have worked very hard to get up to speed. And there's one thing that is very important to me on anything I take my time out to try to focus on is achieving results, solving the problem at its root, not necessarily doing things and having action to do them. So as part of this process, 3 principles have really risen to the top for me. The first one is we're not going to solve it by ourselves. And you hear so many people around this dais saying that exact thing. City council alone isn't going to solve it. Our actions are going to be the things that are going to inspire the community and different groups and different neighborhoods and everyone you can imagine to come to the table and say, okay, I see how this is solvable. The challenge there is we have to give them something in our actions with our limited money that has that inspiration, that says, oh, I see how that could be solved in that way. So when a lot of people are critical, and I'm critical as well in some ways, of where's our private sector, where are they at, right? One of the flaws here is all we've asked them to date is to throw money into a pile next to other money that we throw at land cost, essentially. This goes to my kind of second point, or principle, which is we have to be innovative in how we approach this. If we do the same old things we've been doing decade over decade, we'll find ourselves in the same position we are today, which is trying to tread water while 60+ new people arrive here every day, 13% of which are in this bucket we're talking about, and we're not even making a dent in that. So this same old approach of asking the private sector to dump money, to go put it into the land, it's become very clear to me that, one, that's not going to make the dent in the problem, nor inspire the community to suddenly take this up on their own in the way that we really need them to. We have yet to really have serious discussion on how does streamlining regulation reduce the cost of all this for affordable housing in creative, incentivizing ways. How on the demand side of this are we looking at our job creation, workforce development work to nip away at, again, the numbers by which we're seeing the challenge, and how do we approaching in a material way non-real estate based solutions like a way home. And I've mentioned this group a number of times. If you think, oh, I'm like, some part of the group at this point, and much as I talk about them, I'm not. It's the first actual non-real estate based solution I've heard that addresses some of this. So that kind of leads me finally to my third principle in the way I'm thinking about it, which is, and I've changed how I talk about this now, because I don't want people to get the wrong impression of what the problem is. We need to address our areas of greatest need. And our areas of greatest need right now are 30% AMI and below. That's where the crisis is. There is need everywhere, but under 30% is the crisis. And then 30 to 50 is another problem that exists. Those are our 2 areas of greatest need. And if you're telling me through what we have to vote on today that we can't put all 30% projects together because that concentrates this, or every time we approve these deals and put $9.5 million in, we're going to get 7% of 30% housing. That's going to take us 1,200 years and $11 billion to solve the actual area of greatest need as exists today. Those 2 can't be our only options. They cannot be. They're real estate based. So we need to figure out a way to go after the 9% money, because I agree, smart, over 25%, over a quarter of that is in the area of greatest need. And then I would also mirror that of, if I haven't convinced him otherwise at this point, of Councilmember Harlow to break out the votes, because I didn't know going into this where I'd be, but I know that $9.5 million, if some of that other money doesn't get allocated and spent, is an awful lot of money for us to inspire this community to solve the problem. We just have to give them something to be inspired about. End of report.
Thank you for that. Mr. Phipps.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, and thank you, Pam, Mr. Weideman, for reiterating the fact that even with this 4% project we have on Sugar Creek, that they will be able to accept vouchers at the 30% AMI level. So I think that's important. Another thing, in looking at this particular project of where it's located near the Hidden Valley community, we have a cluster of apartments at Tom Hunter directly close to that light rail station that are 98% leased. They've been sold twice over to investors, and I can tell you that those investors are ready to make some value-added renovations and upgrades to those particular units. And I predict, with it being 98% right now, people are living in them, very affordable, that they're going to be, in the words of the gentleman that spoke to us maybe several weeks ago, and talked about how the value-added nature of improvements to his apartments escalated his rent in terms of price increases. So, inasmuch as they are close to the line, they've been bought by investors, they're going to be value-added, or some of them might even be torn down and rebuilt with new, more market-rate apartment complexes. Therefore, I see that there is a definite need right there in the Hidden Valley area that if we're not careful, that displacement, and if we don't have anything waiting for individuals there to be able to pursue, that could be something that we would regret on a go-forward basis. So I would like for people to really give this some thought to in terms of what they want to do, and if it was a movement afoot to want to break this out. Seems like to me it would have been something that would have been discussed in hand, up until now, getting in the the 12th hour at the dais, and all of a sudden we want to make changes to the way that things are packaged when these matters have been in hand for I don't know how long, so.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Phipps. Mr. Eggleston?
I agree with my colleague, Mr. Phipps. Also, I appreciate the fact that we take verbatim minutes at our meetings. Because on March 19th, when we rezoned 924 West Sugar Creek, we had a divided vote, and the voices of dissent that night were that we were going to be concentrating poverty, and we shouldn't do that. And now there's discussion of voting this down because the people that we're going to put in it are not poor enough. So I would simply like to point out the disconnect between the dissent on March 19th of people being too poor in a poor neighborhood, and now we're going to vote it down because they're not poor enough.
Dr. Harlow?
Just want the record to reflect that was,
Mr. Newton,
thank you, Mayor.
all right, wait a minute, I'm just trying to keep up here. Dr. Harlow and Mr. Newton, I guess this is in response to the verbatim minutes.
Yes. I just want the record to reflect that I was not in opposition because someone wasn't poor enough. So I appreciate that reflection, though. But so my concerns still rest, and we've spoken a little bit about vouchers, and so does that assure us in our decision-making tonight, especially around these 4% deals? And I was at the housing retreat and spoke a lot about vouchers. I like vouchers. I like this concept of creating an opportunity, a buy-up mechanism is how I've referred to it. And I still heavily support that. However, we haven't written that into a policy yet. And that's one thing I spoke about as well, that right now, folks, we've got developers asking us for money. And I'll speak again to the Sugar Creek one, $5.3 million, our largest ask tonight for zero commitments. There's no commitments to accept vouchers. There's no requirement to accept vouchers because we haven't written into our policy yet. We haven't asked enough in a mandate. And so that is my reason for being against it, and asking Madam Mayor to split out this type of proposal. I know there might be some concern from council members around why was this not brought up in the hand committee. I didn't realize this was going to be presented in this fashion. I thought it was going to be presented in an individual, let's deliberate on each one fashion. But the way we're grouping this, I just can't in good faith say, hey, I want to just lump in one vote for all. I think that, you know, this conversation is actually very fruitful for the public to see. And that's important. How are we spending our dollars for our biggest and most passionate issue that all of us ran on? And so I still stand by my request to split out the item C, and actually and further split out the 924 West Sugar Creek project separately from the Brookshire Boulevard.
Okay, Mr. Newton?
Yeah, and I support Councilmember Harlow. I was one of those voices that said that I was concerned about concentrating pockets of low income, becoming a redliner. I don't want to do that. And at the same time, I'll say this too. So the issue here isn't that. We're beyond that. The issue here is whether or not we're going to spend $5.3 million to not solve the problem. That's the issue here. You know, to not have any guarantees for 30% and below.
Clarification.
Mr. Newton, I don't think any of us think that this is going to solve the problem. I don't think that that is an assumption built into
then let me rephrase that to not address the vast majority of the problem that exists. 30% and below. We have no guarantees that this will accommodate any of that population.
Okay, Ms. Wyden wants to reply to that.
Let me see if I can help you all out. Mr. Harlow,
Please do. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Let me see if I can add some more clarity. These developments, both of the 4%, will accept vouchers, housing choice vouchers, rental subsidy vouchers, or they will accept vouchers.
They can't turn people away.
And you're right, Mr. Harlow, this is new. This is our first time around with 4%. This is a typical spend, but both the developers are here. They will accept the vouchers.
They have to.
They have to.
They have to.
They're required by law to accept vouchers for fair housing. Okay, so I'm gonna, we've been doing this for a little while, and I want to say something. You know, we've all said this is very complex. And one of the things that's shown by us talking about this and not being yet on the same page shows how complex it is. So a couple of things that I just want to say. When you talk about the vast greatest need, you know, that's $75 a month in rent. I'm going to wait until you guys have your conversation because I listen very carefully to you. And, you know, finish it and we'll continue. Okay. So when we are talking about the vast and greatest needs at 30%, we're talking about $75 a month. And so I agree with Mr. Bakari. We've got to have solutions because that generation that's paying $75 is probably never going to move up or out of that because 75 to just 300 would be a tremendous leap for adults living in 30% right now. So then the question is, what are we doing to bring self-sufficiency to the children and the other folks in that family? And that is a very difficult issue, but it's one that the community as a whole has taken on in the past by trying to make sure that the people that are in that 30% have opportunities. And we fund a lot of those opportunities. We fund Gethsemane Enrichment Program. We fund Bethlehem Center. There are a number of people that are working very hard on trying to make sure that children get the advantage that they can have to be self-sufficient, or at least get beyond $75 a month in rent. There are a couple of things. I heard a statement about the private sector coming here. Publicly, we have already had a statement made. There will be a private equity fund to work with the city on this. I want to make sure that we are saying this consistently because the community has stepped up to say they will create that. The other things that I've heard is that vouchers, we actually fund an endowment for a way home and owe them an additional $2 million. Those vouchers are directly related to a commitment that the city made for $10 million. So we've got a lot of things that we do extremely well. Streamlining regulation, we have been working on streamlining regulation for at least November that I know of. Jason Key's job is about streamlining regulations. And he has made a huge amount of work and effort in that. And that's particularly around the development regulations. And so I want this audience to know that when we talk, it is a robust debate. Obviously, we have that going on right now. But this problem that we talk about, having more pathways, I am just so glad to hear it, because we only have 2 or 3 pathways right now. And we can't make any dent in this without doing something differently. So the thing about it is, instead of being critical of poor people and having to figure out, well, who's more poor than the other? Why are we making this a competition for how poor and how are we going to do this? We have got to get beyond and begin to get to that place where we have pathways for multiple efforts. And I thought that's what I heard, most of what I heard at the Friday meeting, is that we were going to look at things that allowed us to have vouchers. We were going to look at new ways to work for construction, new construction. We were going to look at acquisitions. And so when I hear this discussion tonight, it causes me to pause and say, are we really ready? Are we ready to really tackle something that we talked about I at least talked about it for 11 months last year. And I got elected in large part because I believe we can do something about this. And we quibble over $9.5 million when our last bond referendum was 15.
Right.
When we are trying not to leverage the dollars that we have for the 9% projects, I'm beginning to wonder if we really believe in upward mobility. What are we going to do as a council as a whole? And what I would say to you is that we've got to continue this dialogue and this conversation, because right now what I hear is a need for us to get it written down on the same page so we can just go through this and say, well, you know, I'm for this or I'm against it. That's okay. That's a valid policy discussion. But the discussion that we're having tonight are over things that we have done historically. So if you're going to say we're not going to do these things that we've done in the past, that's okay as well. Be recorded, vote the way you think that you ought to vote. But I will tell you that giving up any tool in this toolbox would be a great regret for our future in this city. And with that, Ms. Mayfield, please let us know where we are and we'll continue. I would like to say I think everyone has had a chance to speak at least once.
Mr. Winston raised his hand again.
Mr. Winston?
You want to get the last word, Ms. Mayfield?
Of course I am.
Okay, absolutely. Well, I think I'll speak for myself, but I do believe everybody, all of my colleagues, like I said at the beginning, you know, are really giving this their best effort. I think quibbling sometimes is necessary because I think I agree that what we have been doing just hasn't worked sufficiently, and we have to do more, and we always have to figure out how to be, honestly, patiently urgent. We have to have urgency every day that we do this work, at every meeting, at every chance we get to figure this out. Obviously, we have to have patience. You know, we talk about things that we're doing, and we'll increase it. And we talk about this private equity fund, but we know that's not going to be enough. You know, you look at Portland, Oregon, who just passed a $250 million housing trust fund, and they're a city of about 600,000. You know, and that's not going to sufficiently deal with the affordable housing crisis. So I don't think it's improper to continue to push ourselves, and especially to push our community partners to come up with new and better solutions. And we need it yesterday, not just now. So I don't think we're quibbling. I think we're doing the work, and this is, you know, the kind of sausage making of democracy, of how we get to influence that discussion and influence that action. So I think it's all in good faith of what you're seeing up here, and I don't think we should stop doing it or put a kind of hard stop on discussion around it.
I would agree with you, and if I implied that we were quibbling in a negative way. I didn't really mean that. I always look at the world in a way of possibilities. And so I don't mean quibbling, but what I'm saying is this action tonight is just one part of what has to be a bigger picture of multiple pathways. And either we're going to do something that has a path that's already tried and proven, that we've done before consistently, or we're not. And so that's what I'm saying. But that doesn't mean that there are not multiple pathways, and there is great need. But we're talking about something tonight that, again, I've just heard lots of conversations like, well, we don't do vouchers, and we do vouchers. 30% is the greatest need, or self-sufficiency. You know, it's all kinds of things, and I'm not quite sure how I've gotten or how it gets us to the path that we're to vote on. This discussion has been going on for now a very long time, and I hope continues when we come out of committee with our strategic recommendation and have that work presented to us prior to, I hope, the time that we'll be deciding on a bond referendum, and that we'll be working with our private sector partners to do this work. So if I implied quibbling was negative, I didn't mean to.
No,
if I implied that this was not about doing something great, I didn't mean to.
I think it gets down to, honestly, a different point that we also discuss, that, you know, when and how to have discussions as a body. This is the only time that we really get to do this. So we get to talk when something, especially we get to vote on something of particular gravity. This is the time that we have to do it. So if we can't do this here, now, and in the present, when is the time for that? So it really less than about affordable housing. It gets down to the process of how we do government and how we govern and guide decisions.
Okay. All right, Ms. Mayfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Weidman, Ms. Campbell, and Ms. Weidman, to your team, Housing and Neighborhood Services, thank you, because you've been doing this work a lot longer. Ms. Ford, long before I thought about being crazy enough to actually want to be on this side, I was on that side when it was still homeless helping homeless, and then homeless to housing. So the conversation isn't a new one, but I also want us to recognize, for my colleagues who are new to council, last year the Housing and Neighborhood Development Committee, of which Mr. Driggs was my vice chair then as well, so we've been tag teaming this for a while. Together, we allocated almost $21 million for projects. That was the largest in the history of the trust fund. We also have to have a real conversation that we don't want to have in the community, and that's the reality that we are not going to eradicate homelessness. But we don't need to create additional homelessness by saying, well, we're not going to fund housing and create opportunities for those that are in that 50 to 60 gap. What does that look like on the ground? Last year, I was the first time I was appointed, so Mayor Lyles, thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve a second term as the chair. We created a targeted rehab program. So we went into communities. We put 42,000 plus into current homes, not just seniors who are in a financial position where they don't have the extra income to put that new roof, to upgrade their electrical, to repair floors because they are caving in, but also for renters, for them to have the ability to stay in that unit and not have the homeowner just flip or come up with some crazy new price. I need us to think about what numbers we're talking about, because as you said, Councilmember Eggleston, the last meeting, we were arguing the exact opposite. So today is opposite world. Let's look at the numbers. 4 of which I am going to support all of this, so that is unequivocal. But when we look at the 4%, specifically West Sugar Creek, with rents that are going to start at $748, I need you to understand that if any of us go to apartmentfinder.com right now, because luckily we have computers, so as most time when people are sharing information, just like when the police were sharing information, I was pulling up additional information to be like, okay, city manager, help us understand this. On apartmentfinder.com right now in Hidden Valley, the Silverstone Apartments, which were built in 1974, that is NOAH, naturally occurring affordable housing, because we keep throwing around the acronyms and a lot of people don't know what it means. So NOAH, naturally occurring affordable housing. Those apartments complex built in 1974, they're $692 starting.
Those are gonna go away.
In 1970, that's when Tryon Forest was first built. Tryon Forest, according to Apartment Finder, started around 625. Jump forward to 2017. You're blue at North Lake. Blue, that's the name of the complex. Blue at North Lake on Tryon in Sugar Creek area. $975. That's what the starting rates are. So this particular project that's on West Sugar Creek, the goal, because we did have a lot of conversation in committee regarding this project, the goal is the fact that what is diverse price point housing? The reason I shared the idea of diverse price point housing more than a year ago was because there was no diversity. You had these $300, $400, $500, $600 rents, and then you had $900 on up rents that were coming in. Or you had housing that was $50,000 and then $300,000 housing put right next door to it. So this is one of many options. Actually, it's 3 of many options that we're looking at. These are not the only ones. We, as the mayor mentioned, we are utilizing subsidies. We're utilizing our partners. The Realtors Association has been one of our greatest partners. We just had Realtors Care Day last Friday. Without our partners, we could not do this because we, government, don't have the funding unless you as a community are ready for a 10-cent plus tax hike. Now, some people might think that's good, but let's think about that. Those who are in the lower income areas, including me, because I surely could not live in this city today if I didn't buy my house back in 2001. So you want me, I can't, my mortgage is less than what rent is. So you want to say, oh, well, 10-cent tax hike would be okay, I'll pay it, but what about the same community that we're talking about we're trying to help? Because it would impact them as well. So if we're going to have a real conversation, and I agree, Mayor, we got to have the conversation. I am a fan of the idea of us having different opinions. But on this particular project, I want us to recognize that what are we really talking about? It's not apples and oranges, it is an and. We're not competing with each other on it, but I need you to understand this 4% is one of many tools that we have before us. You might not agree with it. At the end of the day, 6 votes. But this is going to bring in an area where I have rents that jump from $625 starting up to $975 to putting something in the middle that'll start around $7. I want us to consider that. Ms. Wyman, looks like you want to share some actual, any more information, but if there aren't any more, Mayor, I have already motioned and we received a second.
We have a motion and a second to approve A,
I
B,
believe
and
they had
C.
an amendment on removing.
No, they didn't ask for an amendment, but we have a motion on the table for A, B, and C.
Yes.
All right?
Madam Mayor, I thought I'd asked for it, but if I have to do it again, if I may, I would like to officially ask for.
Could you make a substitute motion, please?
Make a substitute motion to remove item C from this original motion.
To approve
So
A and B.
approve A, B, and C with the exception of
the Sugar Creek.
of the West Sugar Creek.
Well, you wanted to vote on both of C separately, each of C separately?
Each of C separately. But
I'm
that
sorry,
sounds,
which
that sounds
one are
like
you
the same
saying?
thing.
I'm trying, what would you like to do?
I'd like to amend the motion to remove the West Sugar Creek from item C.
So it's just to remove West Sugar Creek from item C, so it'd be A, B, and C without West Sugar Creek.
I'd make a counter motion to that to.
I'm sorry, wait a minute.
He has
Did
to
I
get a
state that
second.
correctly?
You stated it correctly.
So that is a substitute motion, I need a second.
Second.
All right, I have a second. All right, so all in favor of that motion? Any,
So,
please?
Mayor,
I'm sorry.
Point of clarification. Your rules allow for dividing a complex question. Typically, it's done informally by request. You don't have to do it that way. I think you called for a substitute motion, and the substitute motion, as stated, would approve everything but Sugar Creek and would not leave an option for voting on Sugar Creek.
Okay, then we do
That's how that
need
was
to do
stated.
that. Is that what, we will need the option to vote on Sugar Creek? All right, so we would.
Need to vote, Mayor? Do we need to vote at all on the idea of having separate votes for the two pieces?
Again, in the past, when
it's been
council
by
members request it,
pass
it's been handled
request.
relatively informally without forcing a vote.
So we're
But
going
that's the
to,
mayor's prerogative.
so we're going to vote on A and B
All right.
first. All in favor of A and B, please raise your hands.
Okay,
All opposed? Okay. So we're going to do separate votes on C. All in favor of submitting the 4% development at West Sugar Creek, please raise your hand. In favor?
All in favor of approving.
Supporting.
We're gonna split out, just
I'm
for
splitting out
clarification.
West Sugar Creek and Brookshire Boulevard. All in favor of submitting the application for 924 West Sugar Creek, please raise your hand. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. All opposed? 1, 2, 3. All in favor of submitting Brookshire Boulevard, raise your hands. That is unanimous.
No.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry.
Mr. Bakari.
Okay. All opposed? Mr. Bakari. Okay. Thank you for your patience in allowing us to pursue this, especially those folks here for the zoning. We are about 5 of 9, and we have, I think, 5 zoning cases.
No dissent.
So, let's go back to our zoning. Julie, can you have that script? Julie, can you?
He's not interested in what?
If we can have the zoning committee join us, I'm sure they want to, John wants to introduce everyone. Do you have a mic back there, Mr. Friday?
I do.
Mr. Friday?
He has one.
Okay.
Yes, Mayor.
I was surprised.
We don't do that anymore.
Oh, yeah, it's a discussion. Do you have a mic, Mr. Friday? So, as soon as you get your committee together, I'm going to ask Mr. Friday to introduce the zoning committee. And I believe, can you also tell us the date of your meeting, which I want to make sure that you get that in the record. All right. Mr. Friday. Go ahead. Mr. Friday?
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you,
Thank you.
council. We weren't sure we were going to get to do this tonight. We have 55 minutes left.
Yeah.
I'm John Friday, Chairman of the Zoning Committee of the Planning Commission. Allow me to introduce my fellow committee members that are here tonight. Sam Spencer, Olin McClung, Steve Majid. Michael Sullivan was here, so I think he'll be back. The Zoning Committee will meet Tuesday, May 1st at 5:30 p.m. here at the Government Center. At that meeting, the Zoning Committee will meet to discuss and make recommendations on the petitions that have public hearings tonight, as well as the ones last week and probably some before that. The public is welcome at that meeting, but please note it's not a continuation of this public hearing. Prior to that meeting, you're welcome to contact us to provide input, and you can find the contact information on each of us and the petitions on the city's website at charlotteplanning.org. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, so in this case, we have hearings and we have all of our speakers. If you are here to speak on one of the public hearing items for the rezoning petitions, please make sure you come down and see the city clerk. I have a list that was put together approximately sometime earlier, well, maybe earlier today. So if you have not been signed up, please come down, and we will have the staff presentation, and if we have no objections to the rezoning, the petitioner will get 3 minutes to reply. If there are objections, we will follow our 10-minute rule, and we'll see how that goes. The first item on our agenda is rezoning petition 2017-182 by Quick Trip for approximately 11.9 acres located on the west side of West W.T. Harris Boulevard. The current zoning is single-family residential. The proposed zoning is B2 CD, general general business conditional and BD distributive business conditional with 5-year vested rights. The staff does not recommend approval of this petition, and so we will have speakers come and speak, and there will be 10 minutes for the persons to do this, and Ms. Keplinger will start us off.
Yes, ma'am. This property is located at 485 and West W.T. Harris. It's shown here with the star. I'm sorry this map doesn't show up very well, but you can see maybe some of the businesses that are located in this area. This is the North Lake Mall area. I want to talk a little bit about the North Lake Area Plan, which was adopted in 2008. The subject property is right here. It's on the opposite side of 485 from the North Lake Mall. The area plan recommends residential at 8 dwelling units per acre for the site. Around it, is low-density residential at 4 dwelling units per acre, and then it's, of course, abutted by the interstate. One of the things about the area plan is it identifies the center of the area plan, the North Lake Mall Mixed-Use Activity Center, and then the wedge. Again, I know this map is very hard to see, but the subject site is right here, so it is in a wedge location. The reason that's important is because our wedges are recommended for predominantly residential development. So I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in this area. If you're down in the North Lake Mall area, there are several shopping centers. Of course, the mall. We have the Target Center, the Lowe's Center, and I'm sorry I'm not calling them by their proper names, but that's how we recognize them at my house. Then as you move up W.T. Harris toward I-85, there's some residential development, and there's a rezoning that occurred right at Trayburn Drive to eliminate a shopping center and place it with a hotel and an out parcel. That was done in 2017. Once you get past 485, you really see a difference in the environment in which you're in. The property along this section of W.T. Harris is lined with trees. There's single-family homes that either front, the sides are to the road, or they back up to W.T. Harris. As you move a little further north, we have another transition with townhomes and housing for the aged that are both proposed but not yet developed. And then up at Mount Holly Huntersville Road, we have another commercial center that includes a Food Lion, an Exxon gas station, and a Walgreens on this corner. So why I point all that out to you is because the proposal that you have before you tonight is to talk about commercial development for this site. The area plan is recommending single-family residential at 8 dwelling units per acre, be it multifamily or single-family. There, in looking at the site plan, there are 5 development areas that are proposed. We're going to go through these rather quickly. The A parcel allows one principal building with a 5,000 square foot convenience store. Areas B and E, what we're going to talk about next. Area B will allow an eating, drinking, entertainment establishment. Area E would allow a automotive service station or with convenience, without a convenience store, and that also includes repairs of automobiles. In addition, areas B and E would also allow other retail uses, professional services, medical office, dental laboratories, showrooms, government buildings, and a few other uses that are generalized. In terms of the next area, C and D, it allows climate-controlled storage, regular self-storage, government buildings, financial institutions, indoor pet services, and office and showrooms. If they're doing climate-controlled storage, they have some additional specifications. I'm not going to read through those, but those are of conditions that they will also meet. The site plan itself shows 56-foot buffer this area and here, and a 75-foot buffer here. Access is along W.T. Harris. There are architectural standards for all of the development areas except A. The reason it's not on A is because they have provided the elevations, and you can't tell that that's for a Quick Trip. In terms of this request, staff, there are several outstanding issues. One is related to the land use. There's issues related to the drive-through location and the development square footage, the pedestrian crossing, and the implementation of transportation issues. And there are a couple of requested technical revisions. The staff is not recommending approval of this petition. That is due to its inconsistency with the North Lake Area Plan. Also, because it is in a wedge where we recommend where the plans predominantly recommend residential development, and because this location, as I went through when talking about the context of the area, is not appropriate for commercial uses because of the surrounding single-family residential. The single-family residential that is surrounding the site is there are well-established neighborhoods that are mostly single and two-story homes, and they have been in that area for some time. So that is staff's presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Keplinger. We have, let's see, 7 speakers in favor, and we'll start with Mr. Carmichael. You all have 10 minutes.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council and the Zoning Committee, I'm John Carmichael here on behalf of Quick Trip. All 7 won't speak, so saying we've allotted our time, but thank you for making me aware of that. With me tonight are Paulette Marin and John DiBernardo of Quick Trip, Dwayne Enzer, the project engineer, Randy Goddard, the traffic engineer on the project, and then Mr. D.C. Howman, who's a resident of the adjacent Wedgewood neighborhood. Actually, we had another neighbor who was signed up to speak, Ms. Aronson. She was here last week, but unfortunately is out of town and could not make it tonight. As Ms. Keplinger stated, the site's located on the northwest quadrant of the interchange of I-45 and West W.T. Harris Boulevard. It contains just under 12 acres. It's also located south of the intersection of Mount Holly Huntersville Road and West W.T. Harris Boulevard. The site is right across from the I-45 off-ramp. The Wedgewood neighborhood is located to the west and to the north of the site, as you can see from this aerial photograph, and that's the off-ramp from I-45. The request is to rezone the site from R3 to B2CD and BDCD. The front portion of the site, if this petition were approved, would be zoned B2CD. The rear portion would be zoned BDCD, which is business distribution. The purpose of the rezoning request is to accommodate a Quick Trip convenience store with gasoline sales and other commercial uses that are specified on the conditional rezoning plan. This is the rezoning plan. The access would be on West W.T. Harris Boulevard, the vehicular access right across from the off-ramp from I-45. This intersection would be signalized. The site is divided into 5 development areas, as Ms. Keplinger stated. Area A, B, C, D, and E. There would be a 75-foot buffer along this portion of the northern boundary of the site. It would be undisturbed, and along the western boundary of the site. That's also a 75-foot undisturbed Class B buffer. Along this portion of the southern boundary, it would be an undisturbed 56.25-foot buffer. And then along this portion of the northern boundary, it would be a 56.25 foot undisturbed Class B buffer. This red line here denotes an 8-foot tall masonry wall that would be installed along the perimeter of the site and those portions of the site. That was a request of the neighborhood. The buffer and the wall would have to be established before the first CO for a new building constructed on the site, and that would be true if the first building were the Quick Trip located adjacent to West W.T. Harris Boulevard. There would be a minimum 20-foot wide planting strip and a 14-foot wide multi-use path installed along the site's frontage on West W.T. Harris Boulevard, and then there would be connection from the 14-foot wide multi-use path to the existing sidewalk located along West W.T. Harris Boulevard, which would really help the connectivity, the pedestrian connectivity into the site. Development Area A could only be developed to a convenience store with gasoline sales. The maximum size of the building would be 5,000 square feet up to 8 fuel pumps and 16 fueling stations. These are the elevations that Tammy referred to. Development Area E and Development Area B could be devoted to several different commercial uses. A maximum of 11,000 square feet in total could be located on these 2 development parcels. The uses would include restaurant, retail, office, medical clinics, labs, financial institutions, showrooms. A car wash could be located but only in Development Area E. A restaurant could only be located in Development Area B. Only one use could have an accessory drive-through window, and the maximum building height would be 25 feet, and there are architectural commitments for Development Area E and Development Area B. Development Area C and D to the rear of the site would be Zone BDCD if this petition were approved. The only allowed uses would be a climate-controlled self-storage facility, financial institution, a government building, a laboratories, pet services indoors, offices and showrooms. The maximum building height would be 40 feet. Any building would have to be located in this building envelope so as to ensure a sufficient separation from the western property line. Once again, there are detailed architectural commitments for Development Area C and D. The existing trees in these development areas under the rezoning plan would be required to be retained until such time that those development areas are developed. The petitioner had a traffic study performed that was approved by the North Carolina Department of Transportation. The petitioner would perform numerous off-site transportation improvements that would approach $1 million in value. One thing that the petitioner would do would be to install continue a second northbound lane from Lake Spring Avenue to the right turn lane at the intersection of West W.T. Harris Boulevard and Mount Holly Huntersville Road. It's about 1,200 feet in length. That would really help improve traffic flow in the area. The petitioner held 2 community meetings with respect to this petition, one on January 9, one on February 27. Both meetings were very well attended. The petitioner's representatives also had numerous meetings with representatives of the Wedgewood neighborhood. Petitioners worked diligently with the adjoining neighborhood on the design of the site and on the uses that would be permitted on the site if this petition were to be approved. There are some outstanding issues, as Ms. Kelpinger stated, and the petitioner met with planning and CDOT on Friday in an effort to resolve those, and I think they have really been whittled down. In terms of the transportation issues, I think they've been resolved in working with Mr. Grahowski and Mr. Obregon of CDOT, so we fully expect there to be no issues. There is an outstanding design issue, and that's really dealing with the location of the drive-through windows. If a drive-through were to go here, one thing that the petitioner committed to the neighborhood was that if there were a drive-through window in Development Area B, the speaker box would be located on the western side of the building, and then the actual drive-through would be located on the southern side of the building. In order to do that, you need to have circulation around the building. The planning staff prefers not to have that circulation, but due to commitments made to the neighborhood, we really need to keep the design of that drive-through as currently postured. I'm going to let Mr. Howman have the last 3 minutes with the Wedgewood neighborhood, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Madam Mayor and City Council, my name is Darwin Heilman. I do reside in Wedgewood North Community, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this rezoning request at the I-85 and Harris Boulevard Quick Trip project. I was able to attend most of the meetings that gave me the opportunity to hear the concerns of my neighbors regarding the QT project, and met with the project team. And I got to say that the team met with many of the concerns that were addressed by the neighborhood, primarily about the location, tree retention, and traffic. And the folks from QT were very helpful in trying to make sure that those concerns were met, and worked very hard to do that. There's a variety of additional business opportunities that have been identified on the remaining sites of that parcel under the zoning consideration that we all felt that would help us in that particular neighborhood with some retail and some other opportunities as well. Traffic is a congestion problem in that area today. QT Group, along with CDOT and DOT, have formulated a highway plan to revise a revised plan to relieve the current congestion. It is very congested out there at time of high traffic in the afternoons. You're trying to get home and you can't get across the bridge at 485 to turn into the neighborhood. What they're planning is going to help us tremendously in that particular regard. The 85 loop providing improved travel around Charlotte, as we all know, in a retail location could add in trying to redirect some of the traffic that goes around Charlotte off of 77 that doesn't get to the North Lake Mall area. So it gives them two opportunities to get into that area now that's currently not available and doesn't get identified as much. And I would just like to ask the City Council to approve this rezoning request in anticipation of controlled retail growth in the North Lake area. Thank you.
Thank you. You have approximately a minute left, Mr. Carmichael. Do you have anyone else?
No, ma'am. We understand staff's position. The petitioner just feels that given its location at the interchange, that it's an appropriate location for the requested uses, and the site's been appropriately buffered and screened, and there's been a lot of working with the community to try to, once again, limit the uses that could go on the site, address adjacency issues, and to deal with traffic concerns. So we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Since there's no one here to speak in opposition, no 2 minutes rebuttal, so we'll go right to questions. Mr. Phipps, Mr. Driggs, and Mr. Harlow.
Yeah, Mr. Carmichael, the zoning category that's proposed for this development, does it allow for any truck parking or anything like that? Car wash, truck wash or anything like that?
The notes specifically prohibit a car wash associated with a Quick Trip. There could be a car wash only on development area E, but that would be a car wash, not a truck wash. It's not a very large tract, it's an acre, so there's no anticipation of having a truck wash, but the notes specifically prohibit a car wash in connection with the proposed Quick Trip.
Okay. Can I continue?
Yes, please.
So I think development area E, you spoke in terms of there was some vehicle repair services that could be done there. So no spaces for tractor trailer parking or anything like that.
No, sir, and that's really envisioned to be, if it were to occur there, like a Jiffy Lube or something small like that.
One final question.
Yes, please.
For the neighborhood representative, if he's here, I just wanted to ask, the neighborhood representative was in your role here tonight speaking before us, are you speaking for your HOA's board or just a few neighbors around where you live?
Just for a few neighbors around. I'm not speaking on behalf of the HOA board.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Driggs.
Yeah, we're often in a situation where the area plan is kind of out of touch because it's old. And so we often have to make decisions about setting aside the requirements of the area plan. But I like to think there's always a reason for doing so, like it's infill or there are circumstances, as opposed to just acting as if it wasn't there. So I think my question is, by proposing this redevelopment there, are you suggesting that residential development would not be commercially feasible at that location?
The property's been available since the plan was implemented and nothing's occurred there. It does represent residential, the plan does recommend residential at up to 8 units an acre. I would be surprised if that would be a suitable location for single-family detached homes. It certainly could be a location, I would imagine, for a more denser multifamily development. That's a possibility there, but I think either that or something that's been proposed is more suitable or more logical than single-family detached.
I'm concerned about the traffic generation, 12,000 trips. So maybe we could meet offline, and if you could talk a little bit more about the demand for those particular facilities, like what the available alternatives are nearby, and how we arrive at a justification for 12,000 trips when the entitlement is 400. And even if you went to multifamily at a pretty high density, I don't think you get to much more than a quarter of the traffic that's created by this. So perhaps we could just talk and not keep the whole meeting waiting.
Certainly. We're happy to do that.
Dr. Harlow?
Thank you, and thank you guys for coming back, and then waiting patiently through the housing portion of the meeting. Question for staff, and similar to Mr. Driggs' point, we always have a lot of times, one or two every month where staff doesn't recommend, inconsistent with the plan, outdated or not, various reasons. I guess my question would be, number one, was the plan adopted with the future because of 485 there, now 485 is being there, and then secondly, and I've had some conversations with neighbors, and it seems that most of those neighbors, especially the immediate adjacent ones, are in heavy support. When we think about, is it staff's recommendation that this is still should be single family adjacent to a cloverleaf on interstates, and where else on the west side, and this may be something you can bring back later, on the west side of 485, especially one interchange up or one interchange down, do we see single family adjacent, literally adjacent to the cloverleaf of the interstate?
Certainly follow up on that. The area plan doesn't specify single family. It does say 8 dwelling units per acre, so it could be in the form of townhomes, which is usually what you would get at about 8 dwelling units per acre for an attached product. I think one of staff's concerns that we also looked at, there's an additional 4-acre tract that is across W.T. Harris from the site, and if they can pull the slides back up pretty quickly, I'll show you its location. With
sorry.
this site, it'll take them a minute. Staff is also concerned that if this site redevelops for non-residential purposes, that there would be additional pressure on that site. And if you'll give me 1 minute, I'll get to that site and show you. Sorry, it's just not going to show very well, but it is located right here. Granted, this site does not have the direct association with the interchange ramp as this site does, but it is another parcel on the strip that could also be proposed for something other than the R8 or the 8 dwelling units per acre.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate just getting back around, seeing what other land use types around the interchanges in similar proximity. Just be curious what that looks like.
Mr. Winston?
I think this kind of piggybacks on Dr. Harlow's and Mr. Driggs' question, but it's towards staff. We often go against area plans and deviate. What about this project? Is it this project? Is this type of land use that we think that we would not get a good return on investment in terms of quality of life or for the good of the neighborhood? What about this project or this rezoning?
As I mentioned earlier, when you're traveling along W.T. Harris and you hit 5485, you really do see a transition. And that transition goes from the commercial nature that you have down along the North Lake area. And then as you cross 485, this becomes more residential in character. So you have the entrance to the neighborhood off of Lake Springs Drive, you have the entrance off of Forest Drive. The houses in this area either back up or front or are side loaded to the street. So this area in the area plan was also in a wedge. And the wedge calls for predominantly residential development. So when in looking at this, not only is it inconsistent with the area plan and with the recommendation for wedge, but it also changes the entire area and also puts pressure on other properties along this strip of W.T. Harris for redevelopment to something other than residential.
Follow-up. I imagine that the answer will be we have to take this on a case-by-case basis. But would staff possibly be accepting of a different land use besides residential if this were a different type of project?
I think there are some other uses that could fit in, such as some other type of institutional uses. that might be appropriate. Our area plans usually do not tell us specific locations for institutional uses. So that might be appropriate in this area, something other than the 8 dwelling units per acre. But again, it would be on a case-by-case basis. Had to get that in.
Thank you.
Mr. Phipps?
Yeah, I guess it's probably relevant to think about the time period. I know that this plan was adopted in 2008. I don't know exactly when, but 2008 also, June? My colleague said it was June of 2008, but as we all know, in September of 2008, what really happened, we had a big recession, and I don't know that development really occurred during that period for the next 2 years maybe. So I don't know if this plan is as old as it might appear, but even then, 2008 is really not that old for a plan. But I would say that this plan, I don't know that it really had a chance to evolve because the recession hit and things just turned rock bottom, even for the city at that time, in terms of rezonings and growth and things like that.
Any further comments, questions? Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The next item is agenda item number 9, a rezoning petition 2018-001 by Apollo Holding Company for approximately 4.6 acres north side of West Tyvola. Current zoning, it's in District 3. The current zoning is MUD, mixed-use development optional. Proposed zoning is mixed-use development optional site plan amendment. The staff recommends approval of this, and we have 3 people signed up to speak as well in favor of the petition. Ms. Keplinger?
So Mayor and Council, the next 3 requests, staff is supporting in some form, so hopefully these will go a little bit faster. This request is a MUD optional, which is mixed use development district optional site plan amendment. So this property, it should look rather familiar. It's the site of the old Coliseum off of Tyvola Road. When you travel out here, of course, you have the golf course and the recreational areas right on Tyvola. You have office off of South Stream and Crossbeam Drive. And then you have the beginnings of the development of City Park. City Park was originally came to us a little over 10 years ago as a mixed-use development project that included multifamily, office, retail, and hotel-type uses. Over time, we've had a lot more residential that has gone into this area, but it is still recommended for residential, office, and retail uses, as you can see by the Southwest District Plan from 1991. The site we're talking about tonight is just a little portion that is on the edge of the overall development. It is located in the old Coliseum Mixed Use Activity Center. And the request involves this entire tract, this block. There's an existing hotel that is here, and the proposal basically focuses on these 2 corners, and there's a request for optional provisions that will allow 1 drive-through service window as an accessory to an eating, drinking, entertainment establishment on 1 of these 2 sites. They haven't decided which one yet. The second optional is to allow maneuvering between the street and the building for the 1 drive-through service window, which is allowed on either one of the parcels. They have committed to a 20-foot long masonry wall, which will screen with screening shrubs that will protect and provide screening along the outside of the drive-through. They have notes that all buildings will contain a minimum of 2 tenants, and that was important to staff so that we didn't end up with freestanding fast food restaurants or something of that nature. And they also provide architectural details. So this property is located on the perimeter along Tyvola Road, where we have the area is more highway business in nature. And it provides protection for the internal components along Potomac River Parkway and Spear Boulevard, where we want to have pedestrian-oriented development. So staff does have a couple outstanding issues related to the environment and a couple technical issues, but we are recommending approval upon the resolution of those issues. The petition's consistent with the Southwest District Plan recommendation for residential office and retail uses, but it is inconsistent in terms of the uses that are associated with the drive-through service windows. However, staff, for the reasons that I talked about earlier, such as the maneuvering is allowed between the use in the street, is currently not allowed, but the optional provisions would allow that in this case. The adjacent property was rezoned last year to allow some additional uses to have a drive-through window. The current site plan allows additional drive-through windows and associated maneuvering along Tyvola Road where it's on the outside of this development and will not impact the pedestrian environment that we're trying to achieve on the inside. And so staff is, I covered both of those bullets, so staff is recommending approval.
All right, we have 3 people signed up to speak in favor of the petition: Brittany Lenz, Peter Harakas, and Colin Brown.
Madam Mayor, I think we actually have the wrong speakers list for that.
Am I on the wrong petition? I'm sorry.
The speakers are myself and then Steve Russick.
Okay. Take your word for it. All right, so I don't know that we have.
The right petition.
Have you signed up to speak?
Yes.
I have them for 9 and 11.
Okay.
We have Brittany, Peter, and Colin, right?
Okay.
All right, I'm sorry. Tell us your name.
Sorry, my name is Brittany Lenz.
And we have you signed up to speak on this petition?
Correct.
As well as 11?
Correct.
Okay, sorry.
Is that okay? And then Steve Russick can also,
Right.
If needed.
Okay, Brittany?
Sorry about that.
And sorry, okay. So we're speaking on 2018
001.
001, that's what I thought.
Okay.
Okay.
So Madam Mayor, members of City Council, members of Zoning Committee, my name is Brittany Lenz, and I'm representing the petitioner Apollo Holding Company, LLC, in their request for a site plan amendment for 2 outparcels within the City Park development. And as Ms. Keplinger showed you, we're really just talking about those 2 little parcels in addition to that already existing hotel. This is just a brief view of our site plan. As you can see, what we're requesting is 12,000 square feet of commercial uses, as well as 1 drive-through use. And as I'll explain a little further in a minute, the commercial uses are already entitled for this site. What we're really here for the site plan amendment is this drive-through use. This is the original conditional rezoning plan, which was for the overall City Park development. And again, we are talking about just that tiny little corner parcel over there. This is viewing in again on an already approved plan, and this shows these 2 out parcels that we're talking about as part of the retail district, approved for retail commercial uses. And then subsequently, the existing hotel, which is currently built out, was an amendment to the overall City Park rezoning to allow the footprint of the hotel. So then using my expert copy and paste skills, I threw all that together to kind of give you an idea of what's allowed so far, what's entitled. And you can see that there's the hotel parcel that is the same as this footprint here that we are not doing anything to. And then you have these 2 out parcels, which are similar to our proposals right here for those out parcels, again, for commercial development. So essentially, this project can be built today, but we are requesting that additional drive-through use that would be an additional entitlement on top of what's already allowed in City Park. So this is, again, just looking at our use, and that is our site plan. You can see here that we are committing to multi-tenant buildings, at least 2 units, 2 tenants per building. So again, as Ms. Keplinger said, we're not going to have a freestanding Wendy's or McDonald's. This is architecture that is committed to, as part of the rezoning plan, to have architecture that's consistent with the City Park development. and that will complement the rest of City Park. This is just another view, so you can see possible multiple tenants within the buildings. The petitioner does believe that having a drive-through use is in high demand for this area, and as Ms. Kemplinger mentioned, there were some other rezonings in place for drive-through uses. A few years back, there were, just as a side note, there were there were 2 drive-through uses and a convenience store that were entitled back in 2009 across the street on the south side of Tyvola. And that has since been rezoned as of last year from Laurel Street Residential in order to allow for residential development. So those drive-through uses essentially went away, and the petitioner believes that that demand fits in this location here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, are there questions for the staff or the petitioner? Mr. Driggs.
For one, it's the main change, just to cut to the chase, the vehicular maneuvering. I mean, you've still got 12,000 square feet, right? Still the same general nature of development. I'm hearing a lot of detail, but this isn't a huge change. Am I right? I mean, we're talking about...
It's not a huge change.
So I wanted to clarify also on the vehicle trip generation. You've got existing use and proposed zoning. I assume the entitlement exists for 7,600 trips a day based on the zoning that's in place right now. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right, so we're not changing the vehicle impact either.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Phipps?
So how many drive-throughs are there allowed for the city use
For the City
complex?
Park development overall, if this one is approved, there will be a total of 5.
If this one is approved, there'll be a total of 5.
If this one is approved, there will be a total of 5.
So 4 were already a part of the
Correct.
entitlements.
Correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Keplinger, will you go back to the map? Because I'm trying to get an idea. I know 2, because there's currently 1 drive-through that's active, but I'm trying to see where the potential 5 would be, because there's a lot of land, and we're looking at the front side close to Tyvola, but there is still a good number of acreage on the back side of the land closer to the farmer's market. So when you say that if we were to approve this and that would be 5, can you give an idea of what that potentially could look like? Because do we have any others besides the current one? I know Starbucks has a drive-through.
I may have to get Ms. Lenz to help locate all of them. I know that there's at least 1 here. There may be 2. My understanding is that the drive-throughs are all associated with West Tyvola Road.
So we're talking about all 5 along West Tyvola.
I can definitely confirm that.
Please. Lenz, do you have a response to that question?
We will need to confirm that, and we can get that information for you, so I don't want to say something that isn't correct.
Let's figure out a way to get together and have a meeting to look at that, if there's the potential of 5 along Tyvola, because I'm thinking about the inside, that could possibly make sense, but that will be a challenge once we add housing across the street, because for my colleagues, this is the old Coliseum area, but across the street, we approved.
I've been to the Starbucks and the Panera.
So we've approved housing that's gonna be developed right by Jocks and Jill, so we wanna really take into consideration, because I hadn't thought about 5 drive-throughs along there.
Okay.
So if no others, move to close.
All right, I have a motion second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The next item is agenda number 10, petition 2018-004 by Lisharon Enterprises and holding approximately a ½ acre located at the intersection of Foster Avenue and Bank Street. It's in District 3, currently zoned general industrial. The request is general industrial transit supportive overlay. Ms. Keplinger.
Yes, ma'am. So the transit supportive overlay is a conventional request, so we do not have a site plan that goes along with this petition. So I want to tell you a little bit about this area. This is the property. It's a little difficult to see. This is Bank Street and Foster Avenue. It's right across the street from Marie G. Davis Middle School. There are 2 apartment complexes, small-scale apartment complexes located on this site. The rest of the properties in this area, for the most part, are single-story office or industrial-type buildings with things like cabinet shops and paint shops and things of that nature. There is some multifamily that's located on Bank Street at this corner, and then a multifamily that's up along Griffin Street. So the request is for I-2 transit supportive overlay. The area plan does recommend office, retail, and industrial warehouse distribution uses for this site. In terms of the transit supportive overlay, what that does is it is attached to the base zoning layer, and it allows for the accommodation and the continued existence of some of the uses that are already there and the expansion. What changes is basically 2 things. It will allow residential uses, and it will also change the form so that when new development comes in, that it will be in the form that we would ask for transit-oriented development. This site is just a little over half a mile from our 2 of our transit stations, so it certainly qualifies as an area that could be considered for the transit overlay district. So it will allow the a gradual transition to an urban transit supportive form in an area that's located close to those 2 stations. Staff is recommending approval, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Keplinger, tell us again, or give me a couple of examples of what could go in a transit overlay, because what I'm thinking about is the fact that there is a middle school right across the street. So there should be some things that automatically should not be within so many feet of a school.
Well, right now, the property's already zoned I-2, so any use that's in the I-2 district would be allowed to go there.
But right now, it's mostly industrial use. It's not like it's a convenience store or that type of use that's there currently. So if we're looking at doing a rezoning.
But it could go there currently. If someone wanted to tear down the buildings that are down, they could possibly put a retail type use in on that site. When you add the TS overlay, it doesn't further restrict the uses. It does allow it residential, but what it will do is it will restrict the form of the development, so that instead of having something, instead of like a typical convenience store that you would see, everything would have to be pulled up to the street and be in an urban form. So a convenience store is not something typically that we see in an urban form. Most of the uses that you would likely to see would be more of an office nature, maybe even some residential going in on the property, but everything that is allowed in the I-2 district does have to be considered.
Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Mayor.
Do you have any other questions on item 10?
Vote to close.
All in favor?
Second.
Thank you. We have a second and unanimous vote. The last zoning hearing we have is item 11, 2018-008 by the Drakeford Company and Saucy Burbank, approximately 0.7 acres located at Kelly Street and Dallas Avenue. Current zoning is single-family residential. Proposed is urban residential conditional. Staff recommends approval, and we do have speakers. Ms. Keplinger?
This property is located close to Sharon Amity Road and Monroe Road. It's right off Kelly Street at Dallas Avenue. The site is currently developed with single-family homes. The East District Plan, which was adopted in 1990, recommends single-family at 4 dwelling units for this site, as well as most of the adjoining sites. The proposed request is to rezone to UR2 CD to allow 6 single-family detached dwelling units. They will have a maximum of 40 feet in height with 2 stories, common open space, which is shown in this area, and to tree save. They do have specifications on the building materials and architectural treatments to minimize the appearance of the garage doors that'll be at the front of the street. In looking at this area, I want to back up, doing just a quick preview. Most of the homes in this area are either single-family or single-family residential, 1 to 1.5 story. There are sidewalks on one side of these streets. There is a little bit, every once in a while, you'll see a little bit of multifamily that is in. There's a little bit right here on Semi Street, Semi Avenue. There's some more as you move up into this area, and another little smattering down in this area. So the GDP the area plan recommends 4 dwelling units per acre, but the general development policies recommend 8. The request is for 8.3. It's just a little bit above what the GDP recommends, but we feel that this rezoning fits in with the character of the area, and we are recommending approval upon the resolution of the outstanding issues.
We have speakers signed up, 3 minutes. We have Bobby Drakeford, Brittany Lenz again, and I think Mr. Brown is not here, and Peter Harakis, is he here?
There he is.
Oh, thank you, oh, sorry. So you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, Zoning Committee. My name is Brittany Lenz, and I represent the joint petitioners, the Drakeford Company and Saucy Burbank LLC, in their rezoning of a portion of property in Oakhurst. So as Ms. Kemplinger explained, it's just these 2 parcels right here, currently with single-family homes, and the petitioners are proposing 6 single-family for-sale homes. As Ms. Kemplinger also mentioned, the setbacks are consistent with what is abutting, and they are really trying to blend in with the neighborhood. Here's just a colored-up plan to show you that there's a nice open space and tree save area, a common open space area here. The petitioner is also committing to a streetscape with 8-foot planting strip and 6-foot sidewalk, as well as these pedestrian ramps to be installed on the site. That's just another look at the site plan. The petitioner is committing to architectural standards and is restricting certain building materials so that it's a high-quality product, and is also doing pedestrian scale lighting and features on the garage doors. Saucy Burbank is one of the petitioners. I think a lot of you are familiar with their product. They're a local Charlotte developer, and they actually have product already being developed by Wright, just right across the street of Semi Avenue and Kelly Street. And this is a look at kind of what's being done over there. These are some images. We expect that this petition would have similar product as those that are right across the street. We have no outstanding issues and did not have any speakers in opposition in any of our meetings. So at this point, I'll turn it over to questions, and Peter Harakis and Bobby Drakeford are here as well if they can help with any of the questions.
Are there any questions on the petition? Mr. Newton?
Yes, and I'll speak to this petition. This is in my district, and I want to thank the presenter here for those comments. Also wanted to thank Mr. Drakeford for holding a really fantastic community meeting. There were a couple of folks from across the street that showed up to that meeting, and we're actually very happy with this proposal. My question is to Mrs. Kemplinger, and so I believe you said that the zoning density here could go as high as, did you say 8.8 or 8 units per acre, 8.3?
The general development policies recommend up to 8 dwelling units per acre. The proposal is for 8.3. So it's just a little bit higher than what the GDP recommends, but staff feels that the form is appropriate and still recommends approval.
I see 6, the plan is to have 6 buildings here. There is the green space with some, is there going to be trees there, shrubbery, or something to that effect?
So that's the required tree save area. So I don't believe that there would be active replanting in that area. It would be considered a an open space and tree save area to be kept natural.
And it being a required tree save area it would prevent, so from the standpoint of any additional units above and beyond 6, which would otherwise be accommodated within the 8, that wouldn't occur because it's a tree save.
Correct, there would not be a building in that area.
Okay,
Mayor.
I have no further questions.
Mayor, may I clarify?
Yes, Ms. Keplinger.
Because the site plan specifically shows 6, they would not be able to add any additional units.
Thank you. And if there are no other questions, I move to close.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. We appreciate your patience with the zoning discussions, having to come back a week later. The next item is 13, a public hearing on the resolution to close an alleyway off of North Dodger Avenue. We're going to conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone signed up to speak?
Move to close.
Second.
Again.
Can I have approval, adoption? I'm sorry, do
Item
I hear
12.
someone? Did I miss 12? Sorry. I'm sorry. Well, let's close another street. And let's finish the one that I moved ahead on. Adopt a resolution for the alleyway, item 13. Let's have a motion to adopt a resolution to close the alleyway off of North Dodger Avenue.
So moved.
Second.
Again.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Going back to 12, a public hearing on a resolution to close the east portion of East 16th Street. Do we have anyone signed up to speak?
No, Madam Mayor.
Motion to close.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Adopt a resolution to close a portion of East 16th Street.
So moved.
Second.
The one we
That's
just
what we just
did?
did.
We just did 12.
I thought I did North Dodger
That was
Avenue.
13.
I did 13 first, and I went back to 12.
Okay.
My problem. Sorry. Now, I'm in sequential order. We're going to 14.
You didn't get a vote yet.
Did we vote on 12?
Oh, we didn't vote, yes. Could I have a motion
So moved.
for
Second.
East 16?
Can we slow down? So that we can get on track?
Yes. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Now we're.
We are on item 14, a public hearing on a resolution to close an unopened right-of-way between Bullard and Joy Streets.
I have questions.
We have anyone, okay, let's open. Do we have anyone to speak?
There are no speakers.
All right, so do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
Moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
But we got questions.
No, I know, but we haven't gotten to the motion to adopt yet. I was just closing the public hearing. So we have, do I have a motion to adopt a resolution to close the unopened right-of-way between Bullard and Joy Street?
So moved.
So moved, second.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I sent to staff earlier asking about the street because I think Wilson is the side. That's the street that we're talking about closing.
Good evening, council. My name is Jeff Bodish. I'm with Transportation. Councilmember Mayfield, we did respond to that question. This street is actually to the east of Wilson. It is an unopened portion of right-of-way between Bullard and Joy that you're being requested to close.
So, yeah, I asked about it, but so this street currently is not being used by any pedestrians because there's residential around there, so this street isn't being, so like, an example, Camden connects to Freedom Drive. It's a cut-through that a lot of people use, but I don't know if at some point we're gonna be trying to close it because of what's happening with the train. So I just wanna make sure that this street is not being used by pedestrians.
Absolutely, it's a good question. And the answer to that is it's currently, the status of it is an unimproved, unopened right-of-way.
Okay, because when I went to Virtual Charlotte and just couldn't get a good view of it. Thank you, and Mr. Phipps.
Mr. Phipps, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a comment.
Well, please make it.
Okay. I think that we have to do something to wordsmith this a little bit better because I don't think the people can really understand. I think it's sort of counterintuitive that we would close something that's unopened. And I've brought this up before. It just does not make sense. How can you close an unopened right-of-way?
I think they just mean the paperwork. How about that?
Being too literal.
All right. Is that seriously a question for Mr. attorney, did you?
I would like to, is there
It
a way,
it is a
is there a
question.
way to phrase that, because it doesn't make, it doesn't sound like it makes sense to me.
It must be late, because it makes perfect sense to me.
So the phrase closing is a statutory phrase, that's what we do, and that process applies both to opened and unopened right-of-way that's been offered for dedication and not accepted, and that which has been accepted and maybe even improved as a street. So it's statutory wording.
Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you. I needed to have time to pull it up. So I'm also trying to just get clarification on, we are closing a number of streets tonight, but at the same time, we have staff come to us about stub streets and the fact of, we just had a discussion last Monday where basically what was said is for the residents, expect for a stub street at some point to be connected. So when we're looking at closing right away, a lot of times that still falls in that category of stub street. So I'm trying to understand the logic of why are we closing this when we have other areas that have a stub street where we're practically mandating that street connectivity has to happen. Why do we not see value in this street connectivity?
Absolutely, and I would expect you to ask that question tonight, actually. So this is actually going to be, this is part of an improved rezoning where this was actually going to be incorporated as a buffer to the existing properties. And in return, the developer is going to build a street, so this is an unopened right-of-way currently not being used by the public. The developer is actually committed to building a new street to connect Haywood further east that will actually create more cross-connectivity. Currently, the street that you mistook this for, the Wilson Street, is actually very, very close to this. So you'll create better block spacing actually with the Haywood Avenue connection being created by the developer. So that was kind of a, if you may call it a trade-off, that we could support getting rid of this unimproved right-of-way for exchange for the developer committing to building us connectivity. So it kind of stays true to council's connectivity policies.
As we move forward, can we add that information in under the explanation?
We'll do, absolutely, we'll do our best.
So that whoever's reading it know, because it seems like a conflict in general conversation that we're closing, but we say be prepared for a stub street to be connected. Thank you. Move to close, Madam Mayor.
Second.
Did we adopt the resolution for this one?
No.
All right.
So
do we
move
have
to
a
adopt
motion?
the resolution to close the unopened right-of-way between Bullitt Street and Joy Street.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The next item is a public hearing on a resolution to close an open right-of-way off of Mingus Cabin Lane. Do we have any speakers?
No, Madam Mayor.
Could I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Close.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Do I have a motion to adopt a resolution to close an unopened right-of-way off of Mingus Cabin Lane?
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Okay.
I would add my same comments as for the last one to explain why we'll be closing when we talk about stub streets and the expectation of connectivity.
Okay. All right.
Aye.
All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, the next item is a public hearing on a resolution to close a residual portion of Dearman Drive. Is anyone signed up to speak?
There are no speakers.
If without any speakers, and
To close.
second, we have a second. All in favor of close?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Do I have a motion to adopt a resolution to close a residual portion of Dearman Drive?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? I have a public hearing on a resolution to close an unopened right-of-way off of Duckworth Avenue. Anyone signed up? If no one signed up, can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Close.
Second.
Second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do I have a motion to adopt a resolution to close this
So
unopened
moved.
right-of-way?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that's next. City Manager, do you have a report for us tonight?
Absolutely not.
My man.
All right, give that man a raise.
I know. So we have now a motion that we go into close. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Tonight we have votes on our commissions, our appointments to boards and commissions. And council members voted earlier and submitted their ballots to the clerk, and any nominee receiving 6 or more votes is automatically appointed. And all appointments will be recorded in official minutes of this meeting, and the clerk will now read the results of the ballot.
For the Community Relations Committee, it was for 2 appointments. Jesse Boyd received 4 votes, Karen Gibson received 7 votes, Rochelle Rivas received 6 votes, and Nicholas Wynn McJetters received 2 votes. Karen Gibson and Rochelle Rivas are appointed. For Keep Charlotte Beautiful, it was 1 appointment. Taylor Logan received 2 votes. Gina Patel did not receive any votes, and Nubia Umazar received 7 votes. Nubia Umazar is appointed.
Congratulations. Congratulations for those willing to serve for us. So with that, I think we've conducted all of the business that's included in our agenda tonight. We have one more, we need to go into closed session.
So we're not doing council topics?
Well, I thought we'd go to closed session, take care of that, and come back out and do it. So I moved it.
Hold on.
What?
Do we have to do
Skip
that?
it, come on,
Yeah, let's
guys,
skip
it's
it
late.
tonight.
Come on, let's give it a pass. It's very late. All right, please?
We have to go into, do the closed session.
And then come back to do what?
Well, I thought we'd go to do the closed session, come back out, and anyone that had to make an announcement, the cameras would still be on. Okay? I move that we go into I need a motion to go into closed session pursuant to GS 143-318 11A4 to discuss matters relating to the location of industries or businesses in the city of Charlotte, including potential economic development incentives that may be offered in negotiations.
So moved?
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, we will, if you choose to reconvene, we'll reconvene. If not, we'll take a motion after the closed session to adjourn. Up to you guys. You guys decide.
The ladies are leaving, so the meeting must be over.
I have so much I want
Good night.
on the bed.
They are our gauge.